Since transferring, the new student had remained practically mute, preferring to keep his head down and stay quiet. While he largely went unnoticed by the general student body, he caught the attention of the girls. During a nap one afternoon, a group of female students admired his appearance, and one of them even secretly snapped a picture of him. Later, she bashfully showed him the photo, but their interaction was interrupted when her boyfriend, Tatsu, walked in. Seeing the pair together, Tatsu immediately began mocking the newcomer for his silence and slight frame, but the girl dismissed his comments, simply telling him to take his seat before class started. Tatsu found it impossible to concentrate on his game later, as he could see his girlfriend ignoring him to sit near Jijeon and fan him. His jealousy culminated in a ball smacking him directly in the face. Although he initially played it off with a laugh and a cold glare at the couple, Tatsu sought revenge after the game by shaving the head of the student who threw the ball, declaring that he wouldn't tolerate public embarrassment. It just so happened that Jijeon was hanging out nearby and witnessed the entire assault. Noticing his audience, Tatsu threatened to give Jijeon a matching haircut, but the main character remained completely silent, offering only a calm gaze in return. Failing to elicit any fear despite his best efforts, Tatsu eventually retreated, claiming he was only backing down to avoid trouble with the girls at school. While walking home that evening, Jijeon was intercepted by two students delivering a message that Tatsu wanted to see him. Upon his arrival, the boyfriend revealed that the girl was using the photo she took of Jijeon as her phone wallpaper. The girl tried to de-escalate the situation, insisting the image was meaningless and urging Jijeon to leave, but Tatsu was enraged. He slapped her to the ground, demanding to know why she was siding with the new guy. She stood up for herself, pointing out his hypocrisy and claiming to be her boyfriend, while constantly partying with other women, which only angered him further and led him to kick her in the stomach. Before Tatsu could strike her again, Jijeon stepped in to block the blow. Tatsu threw a full-force punch that seemed to have no effect, and when he tried a second time, Jijeon dodged and countered with a powerful hit that floored him. The onlookers went silent with shock. Although the other bullies rushed in to help, Jijeon took them down one by one before returning his attention to Tatsu, striking him repeatedly until the girl finally intervened. It was in that moment she realized the boy's quiet nature hid a deep darkness, a fact confirmed as she witnessed a disturbing scene while leaving the school. A group of boys cornered Jijeon and forcibly dragged him off to see Tatsu. Watching from afar, a girl struggled to understand what was happening but felt she couldn't just walk away. She made a split-second decision to follow them, gripping her umbrella tightly as she ran to a corner and hid to observe the scene. Peeking out, she was terrified to see Jijeon fighting like a wild animal, delivering punches and kicks while the other boys screamed in desperation for him to stop. Ariam stood paralyzed by the violence unfolding before her. When the fight ended, Jijeon walked past her hiding spot, appearing dazed by his own actions. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment, and although she offered him shelter under her umbrella, he simply turned his back and walked away, letting the rain soak him. By the next morning, students noticed Tatsu was missing, though his absence wasn't exactly rare. However, the fact that Jijeon was also gone drew significantly more attention, leaving Yena's friend feeling sad and sensing a certain emptiness without him. Elsewhere, the student who had witnessed the brawl was reporting everything to a man. The man was shocked to learn that Tatsu was hospitalized with facial fractures and was too embarrassed to allow visitors. The student added that 4 others had been injured in the altercation. Confused, the man asked who could possibly match Tatsu in physical strength. The student explained it was Jijeon, a transfer student who was a complete mystery because he never spoke. Disappointed that his men had lost to an unknown teenager, one of the henchmen grabbed the reporting student by the neck, accusing him of hiding just to save his own skin. The boy defended himself, claiming he hadn't intervened because he felt a 5-on-1 fight was unfair. After throwing the boy against a wall, the boss demanded to know where Jijeon had transferred from, but the student insisted that nobody knew, since Jijeon was literally silent. Frustrated, the large man slapped the boy, called him useless, and asked if the new guy had any distinctive features. The student described Jijeon as looking like a wealthy model who easily charmed the girls. Irritated by this glowing description, the boss hit him again, sarcastically asking if he had fallen in love with the boy. Meanwhile, the boss was preoccupied with unraveling the mystery of Jijeon, the silent transfer student. He found himself dwelling on the boy's rare combination of fighting skills and striking good looks, noting that such an appearance was hard to come by. The following day, Jijeon returned to his school routine and went to the lockers to store his things, unaware that he was being watched. The student spying on him had been ordered to investigate Jijeon's background. Although he had agreed to the task to avoid the boss's anger, he was now regretting that decision as he watched from his hiding spot. When Jijeon opened his locker, He found it mostly empty except for an old phone that started vibrating. He read a text message congratulating him on receiving the free device and explaining that, despite its age, the Xtalk app worked if he needed someone to listen to his problems. He looked around for an observer, but failed to spot the two people hiding nearby. A girl who seemed quite nervous was responsible for the phone, but Jijeon completely ignored the gesture. He left the device sitting on the locker and calmly walked away. Seeing a chance, the spy grabbed the abandoned phone to check if it was unlocked, but he was suddenly shoved to the ground from behind. The girl snatched the phone back and fled, leaving the boy on the floor wondering who she was and complaining about how aggressive bullies had become lately. Nearby, Yuri was talking about her aunt's new puppies and her father's refusal to let her adopt one, but she realized Yana wasn't listening. Yana was too busy worrying about Jijeon, who had been absent for 2 days. Suddenly, she saw him walking toward them with his usual upright posture and empty expression. Freezing for a moment, she quickly handed her things to her friend and ran to hug him, shocking the other students. Through her tears, she asked if he was okay and declared that she would never forget he had saved her life. From his hiding spot, the spy confirmed his theory that girls were attracted to Jijeon. He typed notes into his phone, documenting that the new guy arrived late, was popular with women, and still hadn't uttered a word. Later that afternoon, as Jijeon took his usual route home, a group of men was waiting for him. One of them noticed how much he stood out from the crowd and whistled to signal his partner, prompting them to follow the boy on their scooters. The group surrounded Jijeon, cutting off his escape route in an attempt to intimidate him. When they asked for his identity, his characteristic silence served as confirmation that they had found the right person. The leader demanded he get on the motorcycle, explaining that he was being summoned by Kang Do-il, a legendary second-year student from Daeseo Technical High School. He bragged that their school was in a completely different league compared to Jijeon's, which he dismissed as a gathering place for nerds. Although the man insisted it was a safe invitation and that he wouldn't be killed, Jijeon remained motionless. This indifference infuriated the gang, leading one henchman to grab the boy's backpack and threaten to break his legs if he didn't cooperate while they were still being polite. Unfazed, Jijeon simply let his backpack drop to the ground and kept walking. This act of defiance enraged his attackers, who immediately launched a pursuit. Jijeon ducked into a narrow alleyway. One pursuer missed the sharp turn and crashed into a wall, but the other managed to follow him, driving his motorcycle straight up a massive staircase. Just as the biker was closing the distance, Jijeon kicked a trash bag directly at him. The impact sent the rider tumbling back down the stairs, where he crashed on top of his partner who had just arrived after recovering from his own accident. Despite the setback, both men scrambled to their feet and continued the chase on foot, spotting their target as he rounded a tight corner. They sprinted to catch up and found themselves at the bottom of another steep staircase, where they saw a boy fleeing halfway up. When they finally grabbed him and spun him around, however, they were shocked to realize it was a complete stranger. Blinded by rage, they brutally attacked the innocent student simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. While they were distracted, Jijeon quietly observed the scene from the rooftops above before slipping away unseen. Later, at the gang's hideout, the men had to report their failure. The boss, a heavyset man with a short temper, responded to the bad news by cursing their incompetence and physically kicking them. The henchmen tried to excuse their failure by claiming the boy had vanished into a maze of alleys, making pursuit impossible. This news only fueled the anxiety of Kang Do-il, their boss, who demanded to know what Seung-min had uncovered about the target. When Seung-min handed over his phone, claiming he had investigated as thoroughly as possible, Kang was furious to find only 3 meager notes. He shouted that this hardly counted as an investigation and forced Seung-min to lie down on the floor alongside the others who had failed him. However, the boss quickly changed his mind, ordering the group to release Seung-min on the condition that he lure Jijeon to the school's back gate the following afternoon. He questioned whether Seung-min was up to the task and instructed Daishik to oversee the actual capture, emphasizing that the meeting had to happen by the next day. While the heavyset man agreed to the plan, Seung-min felt a wave of shock, realizing he was becoming more deeply trapped in this dangerous mess. Early the next morning, Seung-min was at the vending machine buying 2 sodas when a friend asked if one was for him. Seung-min replied that it wasn't, prompting his friend to ask who the drink was actually for. Just then, Jijeon walked by, and Seung-min seized the moment. Approaching him from behind, he offered the soda as a peace offering. He explained that he wanted to clear the air, insisting that although he had hung out with Tatsu's gang a few times, he wasn't really one of them. He added that watching Tatsu get beaten up without being able to fight back had actually been a relief, and he wanted to thank Jijeon for taking that weight off his shoulders. As expected, Ji-jeon completely ignored the gesture and walked away without a word. Seungmin was left wondering how he could possibly get someone so distant to the back gate, but his fear of the boss gave him the motivation to keep trying. When lunch period arrived and the classroom emptied out, Ji-jeon stayed behind to sleep a bit longer, while Seungmin watched him from the doorway. He soon realized that Ji-jeon never went to the cafeteria because he brought his own food. Ji-jeon eventually headed to his usual secluded spot to eat, but when he sat down, he found the phone waiting for him again. A text message popped up asking if he was having bread for lunch once more. Looking around, he spotted Ariam crouching nearby, realizing she was the one trying to communicate with him while he held the device. As Ji-jeon sat there, his phone lit up with a stream of messages from the girl. She asked if he always ate alone on the rooftop, admitting that she did the same, and had felt compelled to reach out after noticing him there a few times. When he looked around to find the sender, Ariam messaged again to say she was on his left. He glanced over to see her raise her hand in a tentative wave before quickly lowering it. She explained through her texts that she still struggled with face-to-face interaction and had heard about his refusal to speak, a trait she felt they shared. Just as she asked for the reason behind his silence and he prepared to type a response, he was interrupted by Seungmin. Shouting as if their meeting were a total coincidence, Seungmin sat down uninvited to eat his bread next to Ji-jeon. He tried to spark a conversation by asking what Ji-jeon was eating, but when he received no reply, he simply announced he would join him, creating an incredibly awkward atmosphere as they ate in silence. Suddenly, Seungmin began to sob softly, confessing that he actually had no real friends and only hung out with Tatsu's group to avoid being a social outcast. He proposed that since they were both loners, they should stick together, but Ji-jeon remained completely indifferent to the emotional display. Realizing his tears were having no impact, Seungmin watched helplessly as the protagonist simply stood up to leave. Refusing to let his efforts go to waste, Seungmin grabbed Ji-jeon's arm and desperately asked if they were friends or not. True to form, Ji-jeon offered no answer, pulling away and walking off, leaving Seungmin behind to wait for a response that never came. As the school day ended, the pressure mounted when Daisik messaged Seungmin, demanding to know why he hadn't delivered Ji-jeon yet. Panic set in as Seungmin searched frantically, terrified that his target had already gone home. Eventually, he located Ji-jeon in the 5th classroom, sitting by the window and gazing outside with the poise of a model in a TV commercial. Spurred on by impatient texts from Daisik asking what was taking so long, Seungmin knew he had to act immediately. He approached Ji-jeon with a fabricated story, claiming he had told his mother he had finally made a friend. He explained that she was overjoyed and wanted him to bring this new friend to her workplace so she could meet him. Begging for a favor, Seungmin asked if Ji-jeon would come along just to pretend to be his friend, convinced that using his mother as bait would make it impossible for Ji-jeon to refuse. Taking the lead, Seungmin guided Ji-jeon toward the school's back gate, lying that it was a faster route to his mother's workplace. He knew that being naive in their neighborhood was a dangerous weakness, so he used the moment to secretly text Daisik and confirm their approach. As they walked, Daisik deliberately slammed into Ji-jeon with enough force to knock him off balance. Just before Ji-jeon hit the ground, Daisik caught him by his backpack strap, warning him to be careful and mocking that the boss would be disappointed if he gave up so easily. He then tossed the boy against the wall, as if he were nothing more than trash. Daisik grabbed Ji-jeon by the throat, insulting him by saying that while his face might be handsome, his skills seemed worthless. Ji-jeon reacted by planting his foot on the bully's chest and shoving him away to break the hold, but during the scuffle, his new phone slipped out and rolled dangerously close to a storm drain. Daisik lunged again, questioning if that was all Ji-jeon had, and threw a heavy punch. Although Ji-jeon blocked it with his arms, the force pushed him backward toward the drain. Ignoring the fight for a split second, he prioritized saving his phone, snatching it from the edge just before it fell in. Full of rage, Daisik shouted that he would destroy him with the next hit, but Ji-jeon simply stood up, ready to continue. The bully taunted him, asking how a skinny kid expected to handle the massive weight difference between them. Watching from a distance, Seungmin felt a wave of guilt, fearing that he had led Ji-jeon into a beating he couldn't survive. Daisik charged again, challenging Ji-jeon to block the attack, but the smaller boy cleverly used his backpack as a shield. The impact still slammed him against the wall, yet Daisik was forced to admit that Ji-jeon was smarter than he looked. Ji-jeon quickly emptied his bag as Daisik ran at him, yelling that the same trick wouldn't work twice. However, Ji-jeon didn't try to block this time. Instead, he dodged the blow and whipped the backpack strap around Daisik's leg. Pulling with all his might, he swept the large boy off his feet, sending him crashing to the ground like a sack of potatoes. Daisik lay there, completely stunned and unable to process the move. Before he could recover, Ji-jeon delivered a precise kick directly to his face, leaving the bully confused about how such a slender opponent could generate so much power. From his hiding spot, the observing student watched in disbelief as Daisuke was overwhelmed. Although Daisuke was lying on the ground with a bruised face, the fight wasn't over. When Jijeon turned his back with a look of disdain to retrieve his fallen phone, Daisuke suddenly sprang up. Screaming that they weren't finished yet, he landed a heavy blow to Jijeon's chest, knocking him down. Daisuke immediately snatched the device from the floor, taunting Jijeon by asking if the phone was really that valuable to him. Daisuke announced that he needed to take the phone anyway, noting that he unfortunately had to bring Jijeon to their destination alive. Just then, a motorcycle pulled up next to them. Hopping onto the bike, Daisuke yelled that if Jijeon wanted his property back, he would have to come to Alley Park, warning him that a special welcome committee was waiting. The terrified witness rushed over to check on Jijeon and was shocked to find him completely uninjured. He anxiously asked what Jijeon planned to do, warning him that his personal data and private life could be exposed if the thieves accessed the device. Breaking his silence, Jijeon replied that meeting his mother would have to wait because he needed to hurry to Alley Park. The other boy felt he had done more than his share of the work, and simply watched to see if Jijeon would actually take the bait. Jijeon stood up and began walking, surprising the observer who realized he was actually going to chase after the phone. His path led him up a massive wooden staircase, where he passed several suspicious-looking teenagers. When he reached the top, he found a large group of gang members waiting for him. They had formed a human corridor, and at the very end stood their leader, who looked delighted that Jijeon had actually shown up. Holding up the stolen phone, the leader asked if that was the only reason Jijeon had come. Jijeon didn't answer, simply walking forward to take it back. The boss remarked that the device was surprisingly empty, containing no contacts or call history, but he had found text messages from a girl who had been watching him. Intrigued that Jijeon would travel so far for such a simple phone, the leader asked what it all meant. When Jijeon just extended his hand for the device, the boss pressed further, asking if the girl was a girlfriend or a new romance. Finally, seeming frustrated by the lack of answers, the leader sent a message stating that he had moved things ahead of schedule. Meanwhile, Ariam received a text message sent from the number Jijeon had previously given her. The message instructed her to come to Alley Park, insinuating that showing up would prove her affection and seal the deal for her to become his girlfriend. The gang leader joked that if this plan actually worked and the two became a couple, Jijeon would owe him a sweet treat as a reward. Throughout this taunting, Jijeon remained completely mute, keeping his hand outstretched and waiting for his phone to be returned. The boss asked if he truly wanted the device back that badly, noting that his men had found it surprisingly difficult to bring him there. He reflected that although Tatsu had been his classmate in elementary school, the guy was too reckless and was bound to get into trouble eventually. He then asked Jijeon if he was prepared to face the consequences of his actions. When the boy offered nothing but silence in return, the leader smiled, impressed by his unwavering attitude. He proposed a deal, promising to return the phone if Jijeon could withstand an attack from his henchmen. The boss explained that as a new student, Jijeon likely didn't understand the violent hierarchy of the neighborhood, but by fighting Tatsu, he had unwittingly entered the power struggle. Eager to see what the newcomer was capable of, the leader signaled for the fight to begin. A large, vengeful thug immediately lunged at Jijeon, but the boy dodged the punch with surprising ease. Furious at missing, the attacker screamed for the rest of the gang to join in. The entire group charged, but Jijeon refused to strike back, choosing instead to only dodge or block their hands. However, he was eventually overwhelmed by the sheer number of opponents. Despite trying to protect his head, he took several hits and stumbled, falling at the feet of one of the attackers who delivered a solid blow to his face. As the group continued to kick the fallen boy, the boss watched the one-sided beating with confusion. He couldn't understand why Jijeon was only defending himself without counterattacking, wondering if it was because he had no interest in their gang wars. Standing beside the leader, another gang member pointed out that Jijeon hadn't made a single sound of pain, asking if he would rather die than speak. This stoicism only deepened the boss's curiosity, making him desperate to hear the voice that belonged to such a silent fighter. Raising the stakes, the gang leader announced that anyone who could force a scream out of the boy would be rewarded with a pair of limited edition sneakers. This prize motivated the group to intensify their assault, raining blows down on Jizen, who continued to do nothing but defend himself. Frustrated, the boss shouted at Jizen to stop hiding his true potential and prove he was actually someone special. Suddenly, Daisuke stepped in, ordering the others to back off. He kicked the protagonist, mocking him by asking where all the energy he had shown earlier had gone. Jizen collapsed to the ground, his face already badly beaten. Seeing an opportunity, one of the attackers picked up a large rock, declaring he would finally make the wretch scream because he had always hated his face. However, the boss immediately intervened, kicking the stone out of the thug's hand and asking if he wanted to die by stooping so low. Grabbing Jizun by his shirt and lifting him to eye level, the leader demanded to know why he seemed to accept the beating and what he was trying to hide, insisting that the violence wouldn't stop until he proved his true worth. From a hiding spot, the student who had betrayed Jizun watched in fear, realizing this gang was on a completely different level than Tatsu's group. His thoughts were interrupted when he saw Arayum approaching the scene. At that same moment, the phone in the boss's hand vibrated with a message demanding that he let Jizun go. Scanning the area, the leader spotted the girl standing nearby with her phone. He turned to Jizun, suggesting that the arrival of his potential girlfriend might finally give him the motivation to fight back. With a nod, the boss signaled one of his men to bring her over. As Arayum tried to type another message, a henchman approached her from the side and grabbed her arm, visibly taken by her beauty. She attempted to pull away, but he tightened his grip, asking where she thought she was going. The boy hiding behind the tree watched his crush in terror, but remained too cowardly to move. The henchman dragged the frightened girl toward the group, remarking that she needed to see the state of her boyfriend's face before handing her over to the leader. Arayum and Jizun locked eyes, recalling their brief past encounters as she stood there trembling with a bruised arm. The henchman seemed impressed by her presence at the scene, though the chubby gang member immediately started mocking her. He asked if she had come all this way just to be that scoundrel's girlfriend, sarcastically noting that the young man was a bit busy receiving a lesson at the moment. In response, the girl typed a message clarifying that they were merely friends and demanding his release. Confused by her method of communication, the thug asked why she wasn't speaking verbally and demanded to know her name. When she remained quiet, he realized she shared Jizun's trait of silence. The rest of the gang began to jeer at the situation, calling them strange for communicating exclusively through text messages. Raising the stakes, the boss announced a reward for anyone who could force either of them to speak, insisting it didn't matter who accomplished the task. When one of the men asked if the girl qualified for the prize, the boss confirmed she did. Immediately, the thugs surrounded her and began their harassment, grabbing her arms and pulling her hair while claiming that her silence meant she couldn't refuse them. Jizun simply watched the scene unfold while the boss taunted him, asking if he planned to continue his passive resistance while the men manhandled the girl. As one of the aggressors grabbed her face to force her to speak, a thug standing near her was suddenly struck down. Jizun looked at the fallen man, but before he could fully react, he took a punch to the face himself. The man in the hat shouted at him, asking what he thought he was doing, but his question was cut short when Jizun delivered a knockout punch that sent him crashing to the ground, motionless. This sudden aggression invigorated the boss, who realized that Jizun was finally fighting seriously. After shoving the attackers away from the terrified girl, Jizun turned his attention to the rest of the group. The entire gang united to rush him, throwing punches from all sides, but Jizun countered by grabbing one of the attackers by the leg and swinging him into the others. Another attacker jumped in to grab Jizun, but he reacted instantly, seizing the man by the hair and delivering a rapid series of punches to his face. When a different gang member attempted a kick, Jizun dodged, caught the aggressor's leg, and swept him to the ground. Suddenly, Daishik charged forward, screaming that he would end this, while the man whose leg was trapped yelled for release. Jizun silenced him with a knockout kick to the chin before turning his attention to the charging Daishik. He evaded Daishik's punch, stepped onto his leg for leverage, and drove a knee straight into his face, following it up with a brutal kick from the sole of his foot. Watching from the sidelines, the boss felt a surge of excitement, realizing he had discovered a rare talent. The brawl between Jizun and Daishik intensified as the furious thug grabbed the boy with all his might, refusing to be beaten a second time. However, Jizun raised his arms and rained elbows down onto Daishik's eyes and face, knocking out more teeth and leaving him unconscious. The onlookers stood in disbelief. No one had expected to see Daishik taken down. Jizun continued his assault on the rest of the gang, dropping opponents one by one with a flurry of strikes. The leader remained captivated by the boy's impressive skills, finding him far more interesting than anticipated. The fight took a dark turn when a gang member grabbed Ariam by the neck, using her as a shield to make Jizun stop. This sight triggered a memory from Jizun's past, a woman in a cap being held against her will, screaming for his help. Enraged by the flashback, he walked toward them despite the captor's warnings to stay back. When another thug tried to ambush him from behind, Jizun dropped him with a single elbow strike without breaking stride. He launched himself toward the man holding Ariam, whose terrified scream was cut short by a punch to the face. Even after the man fell, Jizun didn't stop, continuing to pummel him with a relentless succession of blows. The gang leader finally stepped in, ordering Jizun to stop and telling him to take his phone back, admitting he had earned it. He then invited Jizun to join his team, declaring that he always got what he wanted. However, the enraged boy ignored the offer, stepping away from the beaten man and walking menacingly toward the leader. Visibly frightened, the boss stammered, asking what Jizun was doing since the fight was supposed to be over. The boss demanded that Jizun stop, questioning the intense look in his eyes, but the boy ignored the warning and threw a punch. To Jizun's shock, the leader shifted into a fighting stance, dodged the attack, and countered with a solid blow to the chin that sent the younger boy reeling backward. As Jizun collapsed to the ground, barely conscious, the boss reminded him that he had been warned. With the boy lying motionless and silent, the leader advised him to seriously consider the recruitment offer, promising to return later for an answer. He then tossed the cell phone at Jizun and ordered his crew to move out. As they descended the stairs, the chubby gang member asked who that bastard was, questioning whether the leader really intended to recruit a mute, and noting how terrifying it was to see the boy's eyes roll back. However, the leader was lost in thought regarding the punch he had just evaded. He realized that Jizun had reacted instantly and even managed to graze him, revealing a natural talent for exploiting openings. This display of high-level skill only deepened the boss's desire to have him on the team. Back at the scene, Jizun sat on a bench, looking visibly drained from the fight, while Ariam looked on with concern. She suddenly turned and ran off, shortly after which Jizun's phone buzzed with a message explaining she had gone to buy medicine and would be right back. Remembering the danger she had faced because of him, Jizun took a moment to reflect before deciding to leave the phone on the bench and walk away. From his hiding spot, the observing student was terrified, convinced that Jizun could have defeated everyone if the fight had been one-on-one from the start. He felt that someone truly impressive had finally transferred to their school. Passing by the bench, he noticed the abandoned phone and read the messages, realizing that Ariam had feelings for Jizun. When he saw the girl returning in the distance with the medicine, he debated what to do, but ultimately gave in to his cowardice and chose to flee. Ariam arrived at the meeting spot, only to find the bench empty and Jizun gone. Meanwhile, the boy continued running until he was well clear of the area. The stolen phone vibrated in his hand with more texts from Ariam, who mentioned she had the medicine and asked why Jizun had left and if his injuries were okay. Seungmin was shocked by Jizun's coldness in leaving behind a girl who was so worried about him, not to mention abandoning his phone, and he stood there unsure of what to do next. The girl continued to flood the phone with messages, introducing herself by name and class, while thanking him for his help. She tentatively asked if they could slowly start getting to know each other, leaving Seungmin trapped in a state of indecision. He debated whether he should ignore the texts entirely or reply, even toying with the idea of briefly impersonating Jizun. Eventually, a notification popped up on the girl's screen. She was astonished to see a reply, which was a simple, short agreement to her request. The next day, Seungmin showed the fight footage to a friend, revealing how Jizun had taken on the entire gang by himself. His friend was incredulous, asking if this was really the same guy Seungmin had previously labeled as unlucky. Seungmin confirmed it, admitting he was still surprised to have witnessed the brawl in person. While his friend predicted that Jizun was about to become incredibly popular, Seungmin felt a surge of irritation. He hated that his crush, Ariam, seemed interested in Jizun, and he was equally confused by the fact that Jizun kept rejecting her. Interrupting his thoughts, the friend suddenly grabbed the phone, declaring that he was going to post the clip on YouTube to get millions of views, and took off running. Seungmin chased after him, demanding his phone back, but in his haste he collided with another student and knocked a tie clip to the ground. He quickly apologized, realizing with horror that he had bumped into Kim Jinwoo, a second-year student and the second most powerful figure at Baekdong High. Trembling with fear, Seungmin bent down, retrieved the clip, and carefully pinned it back in place. In response, Jinwoo simply slapped him across the face and walked away without a word. A large student accompanying Jinwoo offered a final warning, telling Seungmin to watch his behavior. When his friend caught up and asked if he was okay, an annoyed Seungmin snapped that he had gotten hit because of the chase. His friend tried to downplay it, noting that getting away with just a slap was actually lucky given Jinwoo's reputation for extreme aggression. He remarked that the school was full of insane fighters before pointing out something else. Yena was approaching Jizun to ask about the bandages covering his face. The protagonist's rising popularity infuriated Seungmin, as it was obvious that both Yena and Ariam were enchanted by him. When Ariam walked by, Seungmin tried to act sympathetic to get her attention, but she completely ignored him. He realized that the only way to get close to her was to get close to Jizun. While Seungmin strategized, his friend remained hidden, secretly uploading the fight video to YouTube. Elsewhere, bullies were tormenting the boy whose head Tatsu had shaved, drawing a face on the back of his scalp and mocking his appearance. Goguman felt miserable, but the group showed no signs of stopping the harassment. One of the boys ordered him to walk backward from that moment on, and out of fear of being beaten, he complied. Guided by the two bullies, he walked blindly until the ground suddenly disappeared beneath his feet, causing him to lose his balance and tumble toward the stairs. Just as he was about to slam his back against the ground, Jizun caught him, saving the boy from what could have been a serious injury. Yena, who was with the protagonist, asked if Goguman was okay, but the sight of the drawing on the back of his head made her burst into laughter. Although she tried to stifle it while apologizing, she couldn't help herself, even as he explained that bullies had targeted him. Jizun, predictably, found no humor in the prank, a reaction for which Goguman was mentally grateful. Later, the school gym hosted a secret spectacle where two students fought in the center while another stood guard at the door. The surrounding crowd cheered and placed bets, treating the violence like a sport. Kim Jin-woo, however, was bored by the match until someone handed him a phone to show him a video. It was the footage of Jisung's earlier fight, posted by Xiumin's friend, and the view count was climbing by the second. Kim Jin-woo asked if the fighter was a local student, noting the familiar uniform. Although the video was shot from a distance, making it hard to see clearly, both he and his friend were impressed by the skills on display, agreeing that if this boy went to their school, he would be a hit. Addressing the gym, Kim Jin-woo asked if anyone knew of any recent transfer students. One boy mentioned a quiet bastard from Class 5, adding that there were rumors, though unconfirmed, that Tatsu had been hospitalized by this new student. The news that Tatsu had been beaten excited Kim Jin-woo, who immediately ordered one of his cronies to dig up more information on this interesting new prospect. When lunch arrived, some boys tried to call Goguman over, but he made up a weak excuse to avoid them. As soon as Jizun left the classroom, Goguman latched onto him, showing him some bread he had bought and asking if they could eat together. Since the protagonist gave no refusal, Goguman simply tagged along, suggesting they make a habit of sharing meals. When they reached the rooftop, Seungmin was already waiting for them, though he was confused to see Goguman by Jizun's side. As the two boys exchanged awkward explanations about why they were both there to eat with Jizun, Seungmin noticed the drawings on the back of Goguman's head and started laughing, remarking that he always had to be the funny guy. Goguman clarified that he wasn't trying to be funny, explaining instead that the marks on his body were the harsh reality of school violence, a truth that couldn't be resolved by simply hiding it. He insisted that one cannot avoid the truth, and asked Seungmin to take a picture of him. Although Seungmin didn't understand the purpose of the photo, he complied with the request. While he was snapping the picture, Jisun's phone vibrated in Seungmin's pocket. Stepping away from the group, Seungmin told the others to go ahead and start eating while he checked the notification. He read a message from Aryum wishing Jisun a pleasant lunch, but he naively assumed the text was meant for him, and replied to wish her the same, a gesture that delighted the girl. Suddenly, Jae-min burst onto the rooftop, startling Seungmin, who demanded to know what he was doing there. Ignoring the question, Jae-min marched straight toward Jisun, stating he had heard rumors that the quiet kid spent his lunch breaks on the roof. He leaned in close, holding up his phone to display the fight video, and demanded to know if Jisun was the person in the footage. Seungmin was struck with panic, realizing that his friend had actually followed through on the threat to upload the clip to YouTube. When Goguman asked what was going on, Jae-min explained that the rumors had made him curious to see the boy's skills firsthand. Jisun completely ignored the intruder, which infuriated Jae-min. Asking if the boy was deaf, the bully launched a punch, but Jisun dodged it with calm precision. Jae-min threw several more punches, growing increasingly angry as every attempt failed to land. Finally, he declared that he would defeat the boy right there, even if he refused to stand up. He tried one more strike, but Jisun evaded it and countered with a sharp kick to the shin. The blow completely destabilized Jae-min, causing him to stumble and smash his face against the bench. The bully screamed in agony as the impact fractured his nose, covering his face in blood. As he writhed in pain, he looked up to see Jisun staring down at him with absolute contempt. Terrified by the overwhelming aura radiating from the seated boy, Jae-min scrambled to his feet and fled the scene immediately. The witnesses were stunned by how quickly he ran away. Perplexed, Goguman asked Jisun what exactly he was, noting that his nature seemed unusual. Seungmin then revealed that Jisun was the one responsible for hospitalizing Tatsu, a fact that only deepened Goguman's admiration. However, Seungmin offered a serious warning, explaining that Jae-min's appearance was dangerous because he belonged to Kim Jin-woo's gang. He added that once Kim Jin-woo identified a skilled fighter, he would inevitably drag them into forced battles. It appeared that Jisun was now in the crosshairs. Seung-min mentioned he had heard about people volunteering to fight for cash, suggesting that someone with Jisun's skills could easily make a fortune. Indignant at this suggestion, Goguman snapped back, asking what kind of nonsense he was talking about. He declared that since Jisun didn't speak, he would refuse the offer on his behalf, arguing that Jisun clearly didn't enjoy fighting or showing off his strength. Goguman then appointed himself as Jisun's voice, insisting that their new friendship gave him the right to act as his representative. Although Seung-min was skeptical about whether they were actually friends, Goguman stood his ground. When they returned to the classroom for the afternoon session, Jisun's arrival created a buzz. Classmates swarmed around him with phones in hand, displaying the fight video and begging him to confirm it was him, even if just with a nod. Goguman stepped in to shield him, telling the others to stop bothering Jisun and to direct any questions to him instead. This interference annoyed the crowd, who ignored Goguman and surrounded the transfer student anyway. The commotion was cut short when the door slammed open and Kim Jin-woo marched in. Standing at the front of the room, he demanded to know who the transfer student was. While most of the class hesitated to point him out, Goguman's proximity to Jisun naturally drew the gang leader's eye. Kim Jin-woo approached the pair, but Goguman bravely stepped in front of Jisun to block his path. When asked what he was doing, Goguman nervously replied that as Jisun's friend and representative, any business should be conducted through him first. Kim Jin-woo's burly henchman, irritated by this defiance, asked Goguman who he thought he was before slapping him across the face. The impact knocked Goguman down, and as he rolled onto his back, the henchman noticed the face drawn on the back of his neck. Yanking him up by his collar, the thug laughed and remarked that the idiot was actually pretty funny. Suddenly, as if driven by some internal force, Jisun stood up. Kim Jin-woo ignored the interruption and asked if he was the bastard who had broken Jaemin's nose. When he received only silence in return, he handed over a business card, asking if Jisun had heard of his academy. He explained that he had originally sent Jaemin to extend an invitation, but since that had failed, he had come to deliver it personally. Sensing the boy's lack of interest, Kim Jin-woo began to try a different approach, but Goguman struggled to his feet and interrupted again. He firmly stated that Jisun had no interest in fighting and would not be going to any arena. Fed up with the constant interference, Kim Jin-woo kicked Goguman in the chest, sending him flying backward across the room. Goguman crashed awkwardly into the chairs, the impact knocking him off balance. Instead of backing off, Kim Jin-woo advanced on him, demanding to know why he insisted on acting like a fool and interfering in matters that didn't concern him. He screamed at Goguman to shut up and stay down before brutally stomping on the boy as he lay helpless on the floor. The assault was only interrupted when Jisun placed a hand on Kim Jin-woo's shoulder, forcing the gang leader to turn around. The two locked eyes for a tense moment until Kim Jin-woo coldly ordered Jisun to remove his hand, explaining that he hated being touched. However, rather than letting go, Jisun tightened his grip on the shirt, which visibly surprised the bully. Kim Jin-woo's large henchman immediately rushed to his boss's defense, yelling at Jisun to get his filthy hands off. He threw a punch, but Jisun dodged it with ease and countered with a sharp knee to the face, causing the attacker to scream in pain and spit blood. Although the henchman stumbled over the furniture, he refused to accept defeat. He grabbed a chair and prepared to throw it, shouting that Jisun was finished. Jisun effortlessly leaped into the air to avoid the projectile, landing on a desk before launching a counterattack. He sprinted forward and delivered a powerful kick to the thug's face, dropping him to the floor as if he were weightless. As Jisun stood atop the table, radiating an intense energy, the watching classmates finally confirmed that the fighting video they had seen online was real. Meanwhile, the bulky student, fueled by rage, scrambled back up and lifted a table, vowing to kill Jisun. The chaos was suddenly halted by the teacher's arrival. Seeing the mess, the teacher demanded an explanation and asked why Jisun was standing on the desk. Kim Jin-woo quickly stepped in to cover up the incident, lying that it was just a playful prank. Before leaving, he turned to Goguman, addressing him as agent, and promised to contact him later to arrange a talk with Jisun. On his way out, he tapped the teacher's shoulder and dismissively told him to start the class. After school ended, Goguman described the events to Seung-min, comparing the fight to a movie scene where the opponents couldn't even touch Jisun. Seung-min regretted missing the action and asked why Jisun hadn't left yet. Goguman explained that although Jisun hadn't started the fight, the teacher had asked him to stay behind because a physical conflict inside the school could lead to serious trouble. However, while the boys speculated about their classmate's fate, the teacher was simply in the staff room offering Jisun a cup of green tea. Although the tea's flavor wasn't exactly popular with teenagers, the teacher used it as an icebreaker to get the conversation started. He noted that the atmosphere at this institution was vastly different from Jisun's previous school, and admitted that he had initially opposed the transfer. When Jisun's father first suggested it, the teacher had worried that the boy's refusal to speak would make adapting to such a place incredibly difficult, though he was grateful that the father trusted his judgment regardless. Reflecting on the past, the teacher mentioned that it had been about 4 years since he last saw Jisun, back when he was still in elementary school. He had a vivid memory of the boy training with intense energy in the home gym his father had built. At the time, Jisun had been introduced simply as a friend's son and had greeted him with perfect manners. After the training session, the teacher and the father had gone out for a celebratory drink, and he remembered thinking Jisun was a brilliant child. He confessed that he didn't know what had gone wrong in the intervening years to lead Jisun to such a rough school. He warned the boy that while the faculty had been asked to be understanding, he would have to handle the student body on his own. He ended the meeting by suggesting that the father's physical training had a deeper purpose, expressing hope that Jisun would one day overcome his silence. Outside, a sudden downpour caught the students off guard as they headed home. Amidst the rain, Sungmin confided in a classmate that he was worried about Kim Jinwoo, as they still hadn't found a way to lure Jisun in. Just then, the phone Sungmin had stolen buzzed with a text from Aram asking if the owner had an umbrella. When Sungmin asked why, she replied that she was waiting by the stationery store. Suspecting she was prepared, Sungmin went to the location and confirmed she was indeed waiting for Jisun. Jealousy immediately set in at the thought of the two standing close together under a shared umbrella. Struck by what he considered a genius idea, he rushed off to find the boy and execute his plan. Aram waited a while longer until she saw Sungmin arriving with Jisun. Feigning surprise, Sungmin complained to his friend that he was stuck without rain gear, and upon spotting Arim, pretended he didn't know why she was there. The girl reached into her bag and offered a spare umbrella specifically to Jisun. Although it was clear she only had eyes for the quiet boy, Sungmin refused to let his plan fail. He quickly intercepted the gesture, taking the umbrella himself and thanking her politely. He then lied, claiming that he and Jisun were on their way to a new arcade on Main Street and used the opportunity to invite her to join them. Meanwhile, Goguman was sprinting home to escape the rain when his path was blocked in an alley. Standing in his way were Jaemin, sporting a broken nose, and the large student who had been beaten in the classroom earlier. Terrified, Goguman asked the group what they wanted with him. Jamin replied that since Goguman claimed to be the transfer student's agent, he was the perfect person to deliver a message to Jisun. To ensure the point was made, two thugs beat the boy before Jamin demanded he repeat their instructions. Struggling through the pain, Goguman managed to say that the message was for Jisun to participate. One of the men struck him again, unsatisfied with the answer, and ordered him to speak properly. Sobbing, the boy promised he would talk to Jisun, but the aggressor threatened his life, asking if he understood the penalty for quick access. Just then, Kim Jinwoo stepped in to stop the violence, telling his men to ease up. He handed Goguman a business card and instructed him to tell Jisun he was welcome to join the combat kennel. The trio then left, abandoning the injured boy in the alley. Meanwhile, at a newly opened arcade, Sungmin was trying desperately to impress Ahriam with his gaming skills. While he played with intense energy, believing himself to be unbeatable, his opponent, Jisun, seemed completely indifferent. However, this apparent lack of interest didn't stop Jisun from scoring a point, which caught Sungmin off guard. Trying to save face, Sungmin pretended everything was under control and vowed to play seriously from that moment on. Despite his renewed determination, he couldn't stop Jisun, who played with effortless ease. The match ended in a humiliating 13-0 defeat for Sungmin, as Jisun didn't let him score a single point. Hoping to salvage the situation, Sungmin encouraged Aryum to play a match against Jisun, thinking the boy's cold attitude would finally turn her against him. The game began with a slow pace and gentle moves, but Sungmin was furious when Aryum actually scored the first point. He internally questioned where his friend's incredible skills had vanished to, especially as the girl scored again with clear dedication. Later, they moved to the claw machines, where Sungmin felt sure his luck would change. After several failed attempts, he blamed the machine, calling it a scam, and asked Aryum to be patient. Right next to him, however, Jisun calmly manipulated the claw and won a prize. Holding two teddy bears of different colors, Jisun handed one to each of his friends. Sungmin accepted the gift with embarrassment, wondering if there was anything Jisun couldn't do. Frustrated by this string of failures, he decided it was time to play his final card. Confident in his vocal skills, Sungmin dragged his two friends to a karaoke bar, hoping to impress Aryam by singing as loudly as possible. However, instead of a romantic serenade, his performance turned into a comedy act, while Aryam simply sat there clutching the teddy bear her crush had given her. The show came to an abrupt end when Seungmin choked on a note and rushed off to find some water, leaving Jisun and Aryam alone in an awkward silence. Aryam broke the tension by texting Jisun a thank you note for the gift, but her mood shifted instantly when her father called. Panicked, she tried to leave in a hurry, only to collide with a man in the doorway and cause him to spill his coffee. The stranger immediately started yelling at her for being careless, his anger growing when she failed to apologize. Seungmin returned just in time to witness the scene and tried to intervene, but when the man asked if she was his girlfriend, he quickly clarified that they were just classmates. Emboldened by this weak response, the man poured the rest of his drink over the girl's head, while Seungmin stood by, too afraid to act. Jisun, however, stepped in and grabbed the aggressor's arm. When the man demanded to know what he was doing, Jisun swept his legs, dropping him to the floor like a sack of trash. The man's friend attempted to attack, but was immediately knocked down with a single punch. Jisun then grabbed the stunned Aryam and pulled her away, running off to avoid further trouble. Left behind, Seungmin was asked if he knew the pair. Terrified of getting involved, he grabbed his things and sprinted in the opposite direction. Reaching the street, Seungmin saw his friends rushing down the stairs and shouted after them, but they didn't look back. Watching them go, he felt a mix of fascination and shame, realizing that while Jisun was the hero saving the girl, he was just a cowardly NPC in the background. He was walking home, depressed by this realization, when he heard someone call his name. He found Gogemon slumped in a corner, visibly beaten. Through tears, Gogemon confessed that he wasn't cut out to be Jisun's spokesperson. He explained that Jinwoo's gang had assaulted him because he had been too scared to deliver the message demanding Jisun's participation in the dog fight. Seungmin recognized his own reflection in Gogemon, realizing they were both living the miserable lives of cowardly losers. After helping the injured boy to his feet, he walked him home. When Gogemon asked what their next move should be, Seungmin assured him that if Jisun truly considered them friends, he would step in to help. Elsewhere, Jisun and Aryam walked hand in hand until he let go of her arm, shifting to walk side by side. To protect them both from the rain, she opened an umbrella and held it over their heads. Nearby, Yena spotted the pair and was left speechless by their intimacy. When her friend noticed her reaction and asked if something was wrong, Yena pretended everything was fine, claiming it was nothing. Although her friend hurried her along because others were waiting, Yena couldn't shake the image of the couple walking so closely together. Aryam chose to ignore the constant vibration of notifications on her phone as they continued their walk. Once they arrived at her apartment building, she texted Jisun to let him know she was home, handed him the umbrella, and said her goodbyes. Euphoric from the shared moment with her crush, she skipped happily toward the entrance. But just as Jisun turned to leave, he felt a tap on his shoulder. He spun around to find Aryam smiling and holding up her phone, which displayed a message thanking him for everything he had done that day. After running inside and catching the elevator, she went up a few floors while watching Jisun walk away in the distance. Her happiness was interrupted by the sharp click of a lighter. Startled, she looked to the side to find a man smoking a cigarette and staring at her intently. He demanded to know what kind of nonsense he had just witnessed, but Aryam remained completely silent. Back at school the following day, Seungmin harshly scolded Gogemon for his betrayal. The beaten boy was full of remorse, stating that he deserved to die for what he had done. Hoping to provoke a reaction from Jisun, Seungmin continued to verbally humiliate Gogemon before asking when the fight was scheduled. Gogemon explained that it was set for Saturday night at 9 p.m. in the gym, adding that the gang would kill him if Jisun didn't show up. Despite their efforts to explain the gravity of the situation and their desperate need for help, the protagonist simply walked away. This left the two boys in a state of panic, wondering if he would show up at all, with Gogemon convinced that he was doomed. When Saturday night arrived, the Fight Club was in full swing. Competitors clashed fiercely in the center, trading powerful blows that drew intense cheers from the audience with every impact. Seungmin and Gogemon were terrified as they watched the violent scene inside the school, unsure if Jisun would actually make an appearance. The atmosphere was electric, with the crowd roaring in euphoria at the intensity of the matches. Two competitors traded heavy blows, and every time one fighter left an opening, the audience screamed for the other to take advantage of it. Listening to the crowd's urging, the fighter capitalized on the gap, landing his strikes with brutal precision. High above the chaos, a man watched the events unfold on a monitor from his private box. As the current match ended, signaling the start of the main event, he wondered if the transfer student would show up. Although Jisun seemed quiet and gentle on the surface, the man knew he was a fighter at heart. He debated whether to place his money on Lee Tai-sung or the newcomer. Despite his curiosity about Jisun's skills, betting on Tai-sung seemed the logical choice, as the athlete was known to be a true hunting dog in the ring. His thoughts were interrupted by a phone call, informing him that a student at the gate was refusing to answer questions. Recognizing the description, the teacher realized it was Jisun and ordered security to let him in. Looking out the window, he spotted the boy arriving and silently commended his bravery, though he viewed it as the courage of a sacrificial lamb. Meanwhile, inside the gym, the previous fight concluded with Min Chol declared the winner. Kim Jin-woo was growing impatient, demanding to know where Jisun was. His henchmen were already bullying other students, threatening that if the transfer student didn't appear, they would be forced to fight Taesung instead. Just then, the gym doors swung open, drawing every eye in the room. To the disbelief of the crowd and the astonishment of his two friends, Jisun walked in. Seungmin and Goguman rushed over to greet him, grateful that he had come to save them. Kim Jin-woo welcomed him, remarking that he had arrived right on time, like a ghost, and that he had been waiting a long time for this moment. He noted that since only 10% of the audience had bet on Jisun, anyone who backed him stood to win a huge jackpot. He added that he had personally bet on the newcomer, seeing a hunger for the hunt in his eyes, and urged him to show his full potential. In the center of the arena, the two main fighters stood face to face, analyzing each other. Taesung removed his headphones, confirming that his opponent was indeed the transfer student, and tossed his gear to someone in the crowd, instructing them to play a specific song. After taking off his shirt and declaring it was showtime, both boys took their stances. The clash began with a flurry of strikes, all of which Jisun managed to dodge. When he finally countered with a punch, Taesung blocked it, and the two continued to trade blows, testing each other's limits and skills. As the fight progressed, it became clear that Taesung was the one absorbing all the punishment. After just a few exchanges, he realized that Jisun operated on a completely different level compared to any opponent he had faced before. Despite the chilling atmosphere, Taesung told himself he wouldn't be intimidated, but the moment the thought crossed his mind, a punch landed squarely on his face. Capitalizing on a brief gap in Taesung's guard, Jisun unleashed a relentless barrage of strikes, giving the other fighter no chance to retaliate. While Jisun's friends cheered for every hit, Taesung grew furious that he was being treated like a punching bag by someone whose expression remained completely blank. Watching the feed from a private monitor, the teacher questioned what was wrong with the fighter he had bet on. The students in the gym were equally annoyed by Taesung's lack of offense and demanded the music volume be turned up to boost his morale. As the crowd began chanting Taesung's name in unison, the energy in the room shifted and the music seemed to finally motivate him. However, the song had a different effect on Jisun, who found the voice singing over the speakers strangely familiar. This momentary distraction cost him, allowing Taesung to land his first solid blows. While the energized audience identified the song as a hit by the popular girl group Ilhakan, Jisun's mind drifted to a memory. He recalled a girl telling him that once her group debuted, he would officially be a pop star's boyfriend. She had asked how he felt about her contract situation, worried about whether she could meet the conditions. Although his friends had interrupted to invite him out, he remembered reassuring her that whatever choice she made would be the right answer for him, a response she had accepted with gratitude. Suddenly, the roar of the crowd snapped Jisun back to reality, but his lack of focus had already allowed Taesung to land a flurry of punches. His friends watched in worry, confused by his sudden lethargy, while Taesung began to underestimate his opponent, convinced that Jisun had just been overly cautious earlier. With his confidence soaring and the crowd chanting his name, Taesung pressed his advantage. It became clear to Jisun's friends that the music echoing from the radio was the source of his distraction, as he was being continuously pushed back. They rushed to the person controlling the audio and asked him to turn it down, explaining that Jisun couldn't concentrate. However, the boy rudely dismissed their request, mocking them by claiming that the quiet kid was simply losing because he wasn't strong enough. Seizing the moment, Goguman grabbed the speaker and sprinted away, managing to cut the music despite attempts to stop him. In the sudden silence, a flood of memories overtook the protagonist. He recalled the painful moment his girlfriend broke up with him, declaring that she was fed up with the situation and no longer wanted to be involved. She had simply turned her back and walked away, leaving him screaming her name in desperation until security guards had to restrain him and remove him from the premises. While Jisun was trapped in these recollections, Taesung continued his assault, landing blow after blow. Victory seemed all but guaranteed as he prepared to deliver the final strike that would end the match. Jason had fallen to his knees, his mind still lingering on the girl, and to the spectators, the fight was effectively over. However, just as the finishing kick was about to land, Jason dodged with shocking agility. It was as if his mind had suddenly reset. His body surged with renewed energy as he furiously charged at his opponent. He delivered a devastating punch to Tae-sung's face, slamming him into the floor with a force that stunned the crowd. Jason didn't stop there. He followed up with another kick to the face, leaving his rival spitting blood and completely confused by the sudden turnaround. From his vantage point, Kim Jin-woo realized the outcome was already decided. While the rest of the audience fell into a shocked silence, Jason's supporters cheered wildly. Tae-sung, who had been dominating the match just seconds earlier, was now disoriented and being beaten as if he were nothing. Jason stood over him, emanating a terrifying aura. Although the fallen fighter begged him to stop, the protagonist ignored the pleas and continued to deliver kick after kick to his face. The brutality was so intense that the crowd began to fear Jason might actually kill his opponent if he didn't stop. He seemed possessed by a blind rage. When people asked Kim Jin-woo if he was worried about the potential fatality, he showed no concern at all. Instead, he looked pleased by the boy's bloodlust. He was already calculating the profits, viewing Jason as a future box office star and wondering which opponent would make for the most thrilling match next. Finally, Jason's friends intervened, physically restraining him and insisting that he had already won. While Tae-sung's teacher watched in fury at his favorite student's defeat, Kim Jin-woo saw only an opportunity. He believed that with the right training, he could turn Jason into a profitable and loyal hound for his own purposes. Although Sungmin knew he should return the stolen phone, he couldn't help but reply to a few messages while pretending to be Jason. Noticing his friend's hesitation, Goguman placed a hand on his shoulder and asked if he still had feelings for the girl. Sungmin admitted that while he used to like her, he now understood where he truly belonged. Goguman gave him a shove, urging him to return the device immediately. Sungmin approached the bench where Jason was sitting and handed the phone back, apologizing for impersonating him. Before walking away, he confessed to sending one final message and asked Jason not to reject Arium, adding that they made a beautiful couple. When Jason checked the screen, he saw a notification that Arium was nearly there, and for the first time, he felt a wave of nervousness. Moments later, the girl arrived, running to meet him. From their hiding spot, Goguman admired her beauty and commented that the two were a perfect match, while Sungmin quietly lamented losing the girl of his dreams. Deciding it was time to leave the lovebirds alone, Goguman invited Sungmin over for a sleepover and video games, and the pair departed. Left alone, silence settled over the couple, broken only by the crashing waves. Arium broke the ice by texting that the invitation had surprised her, to which Jason replied that she had been on his mind. She attempted to make conversation about the sound of the ocean, but he responded with only an emoji. When she asked if he visited this spot often, he admitted it was his first time. Jason then asked about her usual bedtime, and she revealed that she usually slept at 10. In fact, she had woken up specifically because of his message. Hearing this, he stood up to walk her home, but Arium grabbed his arm and refused to leave. Jason didn't argue. He simply accepted her request and went to a vending machine to buy them sodas. After she thanked him, he asked why she was so reluctant to go home. She confessed that her house felt like a prison and explained that receiving his message earlier had been a shock. She recalled a text from the previous day where he had simply wished her a good night, noting that it had come unexpectedly during a difficult moment and gave her the strength to keep going. Jason checked his chat history and realized that Seungmin was actually the one who had sent that encouraging text, but as she expressed her gratitude, he decided to keep that secret to himself. Curious about his silence, she finally decided to ask why he never spoke. The question sent the boy deep into his memories, specifically to a moment when his ex-girlfriend seemed ready to abandon him. He recalled how, even as security guards restrained him and threatened him with arrest, the girl had run back to embrace him tightly. She had confessed that despite practicing a cold breakup multiple times, she couldn't go through with it upon seeing him. She swore she wouldn't leave him, even if it cost her life, and asked him what she should do. In response, he had assured her that everything would be fine and promised to remain by her side no matter what, unaware that the CEO of Bangsan Entertainment was watching the emotional scene from a rooftop above. Returning to the present, he answered Arium by explaining that words possess the power to pierce the soul and paralyze a person completely. She found his perspective quite philosophical, admitting that while she didn't know his full story, she assumed his reasons were far more complex than her own. When he asked why she remained reluctant to speak, she offered a simple explanation. She felt that her words were as dirty as her father's, and although she acknowledged this was a stupid reason, she realized his way of speaking was an inescapable part of who she was. To clear their heads, Jason invited her for a walk along the beach, which was bustling with the usual Saturday night crowd. As they passed a local bar, a commotion broke out inside where a group of men was harassing a younger customer for drinking. The young man, who turned out to be Kang Do-il, the gang leader interested in recruiting Jason, arrogantly replied that he looked old enough and just wanted to drink in peace. When the agitators asked where his lackeys were and why he was alone, Do-il retorted that he had given the kids a holiday because he found it easier that way. The group ordered him to leave or face the consequences, but Do-il only mocked them, asking if they held on to so much hatred because they had been bullied by seniors at Daiseo High. The tension peaked when one of the men knocked items off the table, signaling an intent to attack. Unfazed, Kang Do-il stood up, kicked the table over, and declared that he had never been afraid of a beating. Bystanders inside and on the street watched as a 1-on-4 brawl erupted, but for Do-il, it seemed as easy as playing a video game. However, mid-fight, his attention was caught by a flash of blue hair. Spotting Jason, he smiled broadly and shouted that he was incredibly happy to see his friend there. The guy remarked that he was just planning to visit Jason, but fate had conveniently arranged their meeting right there. Claiming it was destiny, he hugged the confused boy, who clearly didn't understand what was happening. Their reunion was cut short when the brawlers from the bar rushed out, demanding to know if Jason belonged to the same gang. The guy retorted by asking if the connection wasn't obvious, boldly affirming that he and Jason were friends. The thugs, however, didn't care about their bond and attacked with hatred, screaming that they would kill both punks. Jason immediately positioned Ariam behind him for protection. While the gang leader handled one attacker, another lunged at Jason, declaring that if they were friends, they both deserved a beating. With impressive ease, the protagonists took down the bully. Working in tandem, the two boys fought off the group, warning each other of incoming attacks and defeating everyone in seconds. Watching the scene unfold, Ariam reflected that while Jisoo often seemed to sit atop an unreachable wall, he would occasionally come down to help others. She realized he wasn't truly cold. Unlike everyone else fighting for selfish desires, Jisoo seemed driven by a desperate cause far beyond his own will. Suddenly, one of the men pulled a knife and approached the boy from behind. Unaware of the danger, Jisoo was nearly struck, but Ariam screamed a desperate warning just as his fighting partner yelled for him to duck. Jisoo reacted instantly, dodging the blade. Immediately after, the gang leader delivered a flying kick to the attacker's face, cursing him for the audacity of using a weapon against just two opponents. He mocked the man, stating that only unskilled people resorted to such tactics when they were losing. Together, they finished off the remaining attackers. The guy asked Jisoo if he didn't think they made a beautiful duo, given how perfectly they had handled the fight. Instead of answering, Jisoo looked at Ariam and saw her eyes filled with tears. Misinterpreting the silence, the guy asked if Jisoo was scared, dismissing the brawl as nothing serious. In response, the protagonist punched him in the face. Confused, the guy asked what the hell was going on, only for Jisoo to punch him in the stomach without a word, knocking him to the ground. Lying on the pavement, the guy confessed that he had set the whole thing up just to see Jisoo fight for real. When the protagonist threatened to end him right there, the boy raised his hands in surrender, insisting he didn't want to fight because they were on the same side now. He apologized for his methods, explaining it was merely a test that Jisoo had passed with flying colors, and asked him to join his gang as a friend. However, Jisoo simply turned his back and walked away with Ariam. The guy followed them, commenting on how intimate they seemed to be together so late at night. He expressed satisfaction, feeling he had played a role in bringing them together, and since he owed Jisoo for the help, he offered to show them a place to rest instead of letting them wander aimlessly. Although they hesitated at first, the couple eventually agreed to follow the guy. He led them to a comic book library and had to wake up the attendant, who was fast asleep behind the counter, to assist his new guests. The employee remarked that he had never seen these faces before, prompting Doyle to introduce them as his new friends. Noting their appearance, the attendant joked that Doyle's taste in company had improved since these friends were actually good-looking. He told them to sit anywhere they liked and offered some extra time on the house. While Doyle was signing them in, the scene shifted to Ariam's home. Her father woke up from a heavy sleep and immediately noticed the front door was open. He checked his daughter's room and, finding it empty, began searching the entire house in a panic when he couldn't locate her. Back at the library, Doyle explained that this was his secret hideout where he came to relax. He mentioned that he rarely let anyone else in, so he was granting them special permission to settle the debt he owed them. He encouraged them to unwind and read a manhwa before finding a corner to lie down and taking a nap himself. In the quiet atmosphere, Jisun used his phone to ask Ariam if she was feeling scared. She replied that she was no longer afraid and felt calm. She then suggested they read a comic together, and after he agreed, they picked a title. Despite a few moments of shyness from the girl, they soon settled into a comfortable silence as they read. Later, the attendant returned with free drinks. He expressed surprise that Doyle was hanging out with people like them, noting that the boy usually only associated with troublemakers involved in fights. As he handed over the beverages, the couple noticed that 2 fingers were missing from his hand. Seeing their reaction, the man reassured them that he was used to it now, even though it had been difficult at first. He revealed that Doyle was the one who still struggled to accept the injury, explaining that the boy had been an ordinary child until that incident caused him to stray from the right path. Apologizing for talking too much on their first visit, he simply asked them to look after Doyle, describing him as a good kid deep down. Hours drifted by, and the girl eventually fell asleep, leaning on Jisun's shoulder. Her deep slumber was interrupted by her phone ringing, which startled her awake. She felt embarrassed to find herself resting on him. After seeing 3 missed calls, she typed a message to Jisun explaining that her father was calling and she had to go. Jisun immediately offered to walk her home. They walked through the beautiful night until they reached her apartment building. After riding the elevator to her door, she thanked him for the few hours of freedom she had enjoyed by his side. Jisun watched her walk toward the apartment, still puzzling over her parting words. She had barely finished entering the passcode when the door flew open, revealing her father in a rage. He immediately began screaming at her, demanding to know if she knew what time it was, and accusing her of losing her mind for ignoring his calls. Her expression only seemed to fuel his anger. He slapped her across the face, cursing at her for daring to look at him that way when she was clearly in the wrong. As she fell to the floor, he shouted about her lack of respect. Grabbing her, he dragged her inside while demanding to know why she had left without permission and what she had been doing until that hour. His voice grew louder with every question he screamed. Unable to stand by and watch, Jisun felt a surge of rage and stepped forward to intervene. The father spotted him immediately, convinced that this boy was the reason his daughter had been out so late, and swore that he wouldn't let him leave alive. Desperate to stop the violence, the girl grabbed her father's clothes with both hands, hanging on even as he ordered her to let go. With tears streaming down her face, she looked at Jisun and screamed for him to get out of there. Her father struck her again, threatening to kill the boy right then and there, but she continued to hold him back, begging Jisun to save himself. She yelled for him to leave one last time, and he finally listened, turning to flee the scene. As he ran, he reflected on the fact that he had learned to run away long ago when he first moved to this city, and once again, he was failing to stand his ground. While the father continued to rage at the girl for restraining him, Jisun took the opportunity to escape. Succumbing to his nature of avoiding things he couldn't face, he closed his eyes, trying to bury the reality of the situation in silence and darkness. Exhausted and shaken, he eventually reached his own home, where an old man was kneeling in prayer before a Buddha statue. Jisun knelt at the doorstep, catching the elder's attention. The man noted that he was late, observing that since this was the first time it had happened, Jisun must have a lot weighing on his mind. This neighborhood was supposed to be a quiet refuge, yet despite his intentions, he had formed new friendships over time. Now he faced a choice before life became too complicated. Would he accept these connections, or would he run away again? A few days passed after that night, but the fighting at school continued without pause. The atmosphere inside the fight club was defined by sheer brutality. Victors would only cease their assault when their opponents begged for mercy, while bullies bragged about crushing weaker students. When one boy surrendered early, a furious Jin Woo demanded to know why he was quitting so soon. The boy explained that he saw no point in continuing a fight, he had almost no chance of winning. In response, Jin Woo struck him across the face, declaring that such a defeatist mentality had no place in the ring. He told the boy that he didn't deserve the title of fighter and ordered him to get out of his sight immediately. Shortly after, a henchman informed Jin Woo that Professor Kim was waiting for him in the warehouse. Once there, the professor complained that they needed resilient warriors rather than fragile amateurs, noting that everyone was eager to see Jisun fight again. When Jin Woo tried to explain that it was difficult to find recruits because most candidates lacked endurance or feared injury, the professor coldly asked if he was admitting incompetence. Trembling, Jin Woo clarified that he wasn't giving up, but simply asking for a month to find someone suitable. The older man mocked him, reminding him that he had raised him from wearing knockoff sneakers to luxury suits. but warned that their clients were not patient enough to wait that long. He threatened to remove Jin-woo from the operation if he couldn't deliver, suggesting there were other places to get a dopamine fix. Terrified, Jin-woo fell to his knees, pleading to stay and promising to do his best. However, the professor simply placed his foot on the boy's head and issued a strict ultimatum. He had exactly 1 week to find an opponent. If he failed, the professor decided that Jin-woo would have to take responsibility and fight Jisun himself, a matchup the clients would surely enjoy. After the professor left, reminding him of the deadline, Jin-woo was left seething with rage at the terrifying prospect of facing Jisun in the ring, realizing he urgently needed to find a substitute. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the school rooftop, where the 3 friends had established a comfortable lunch routine. Gogumon had brought a pork cutlet bento, insisting that eating bread every day wasn't healthy, and both friends urged Jisun to eat more, pointing out that he was too thin. Their meal was interrupted when Jisun's phone vibrated, prompting Seungmin to immediately ask if the text was from Aryam and apprehensively inquire about how their relationship was progressing. As the protagonist stepped away to check the message in private, Seungmin tried to peek, but Gogumon smacked him on the head and told him to mind his own business. The message was indeed from Aryam, asking if he wanted to meet at the comic book store later. Hours later, the two met up at the shop, where they sat together for a while, content to simply share the silence in each other's company. Aryam finally gathered the courage to speak, admitting that remaining silent would be strange after she had screamed earlier. She confessed to hating her voice because she felt she had inherited her father's vulgar way of speaking during her childhood. Although she wished it were possible to hide how she sounded, she told Jisun she didn't regret speaking up because she hadn't wanted him to get hurt. Opening up about her past, she explained that her mother had eventually left, unable to endure her father's behavior any longer. Left alone with him, Aryam had spoken less and less until she stopped completely, a choice that caused her few remaining friends to drift away. She confided that she had felt incredibly lonely until she heard rumors about a new transfer student who also didn't speak, which made her wonder if his history was similar to hers. Just then, Doyle arrived at the comic book store, where the clerk informed him that his friends were waiting. Doyle was astonished to find Aryam talking and asked what had caused the change. She explained that she had been trapped in a situation where silence was no longer an option. Without pressing for details about the incident, Doyle smiled and said that regardless of the circumstances, he was simply happy they could communicate freely, and he congratulated her on finding her voice. After a brief moment of silence, Doyle started to ask about Jisun, but quickly decided to drop the subject. Instead, he suggested that since they were all together, they should go out for dinner. He even invited the clerk to join them, reasoning that with no customers in the store, he could simply pull down the blinds and close up early. Meanwhile, Kim Jin-woo was seething with rage, completely obsessed with the upcoming fight against Jisun. His bulky friend complained that the 1-week deadline they had been given was far too cruel. Furious, Kim demanded to know if there were any bullies capable of taking on the challenge. The friend admitted he didn't know any students who would risk the shame of losing to the transfer student, but he did have one person in mind, a high school dropout who had become a full-fledged gangster. He warned that involving such a dangerous person would lead to serious trouble, asking if it wasn't an exaggeration to go that far. But Kim Jin-woo ignored the warning and demanded the name. Elsewhere in the city, a man was being cornered by a loan shark regarding a debt that was 2 months overdue. The shark interpreted the man's disappearance as an attempt to avoid payment, despite the debtor's tearful claims that he was trying to settle the account. Wielding a pair of scissors, the loan shark questioned the man's honesty, pointing out that they had dragged him out of a casino. Desperate, the man tried to explain that he had gone to the casino hoping to win enough money to pay off the entire debt in one go, insisting that a dream about his ancestors was a sign that something big was about to happen in his life. Gripping the debtor's hand tightly, the loan shark squeezed the man's finger with a pair of scissors. The terrified victim begged for more time, but the criminal was unmoved, pointing out that the man hadn't paid his debts even when he had a job, so trying to settle the balance through gambling was absurd. He asked the trembling man if they looked like idiots to him. The henchman, who was holding the hand in place, remarked that it would sting a little, but promised a clean, precise cut, boasting of his expertise in the matter. Despite the debtor's desperate pleas for forgiveness, no one listened, and his finger was severed. The henchman then issued a strict deadline. The man had exactly 1 hour to find the money if he wanted the finger back in time to reattach it. He ordered the weeping man to run, and the debtor immediately fled. Watching the victim leave, the boss teased his subordinate, asking if he was happy to add another item to his collection. The henchman replied that he actually disliked such low-quality fingers, though he admitted it had been a long time since he had felt that kind of thrill. This sadistic man was Yoongi Tai, the specific sunbae the burly student had suggested for the fight. He was infamous for having cut off a classmate's finger, a student who played guitar in the school band, an act that had landed him in juvenile detention before he fully committed to life as a gangster. Kim Jin-woo was surprisingly cheerful about the idea and asked how they could meet him. While the burly friend seemed shocked that they might actually recruit such a dangerous person, another boy was thrilled by the prospect of a showdown between a real gangster and the invincible transfer student. He argued that they were in no position to be picky about whether their champion was a criminal or a killer. They simply needed to act. Meanwhile, the group of 4 friends headed out for dinner. Jung grumbled about leaving the house, but Doyle insisted that he couldn't just rot inside the comic book store every day. Trying to make conversation, Doyle brought up Jung's past on stage, asking if he was in a band since he was such a talented guitarist. Jung dismissed it as ancient history, and Aryam quickly jumped in to say it was just a phase. Doyle eventually dropped the subject, asking instead if they preferred street food or Chinese cuisine. As they walked down the street, a car carrying the loan shark and his crew drove by. Spotting the group, the criminal told his driver to pull over so he could greet some friends. He stepped out of the vehicle and began shouting for Jung. As he closed the distance, he remarked that he hadn't been sure from afar, but up close, he confirmed it was definitely him. As the man brought up the past, the boy recoiled in sheer desperation, backing away until he bumped into Doyle, who steadied him while trying to make sense of the scene. The gangster mocked the boy's fear, asking if he had seen a ghost, before stepping closer to comment on how nice it was to see the 2 young men so close. He questioned why the boy was paralyzed, claiming he was actually very happy to run into them after such a long time, and demanded a greeting. One of the young men stepped in to apologize, explaining that they were on their way to get food, and adding dryly that continuing this conversation would ruin their appetites. Gitai paused for a moment, then smiled and pulled out his wallet, insisting on paying for their meal since it had been so long. He stuffed the cash into the young man's pocket, telling them to buy some meat because students usually didn't have money. Turning his attention to Byung-gu, Gitai remarked that their destinies seemed to cross frequently as he retrieved something from his own pocket. He stated that he had run all the way there to deliver an item he had acquired that very day, believing Byung-gu really needed it. While the friends watched in the background, Byung-gu tried to pull away, but Gitai offered the object as a gift. He instructed the boy to take it to the hospital, speak to the medical staff, and ask them to reattach the finger so he could play the guitar again, aggressively ordering him to declare that it was his dream. As the group watched the disturbing interaction, the blue-haired young man looked away, turning his face to the side. The scene shifts to show him with his back turned later that same night. Gitai calls out the name Jiban, casually asking if he has gotten used to the neighborhood yet, though noting that it didn't seem like it. He advised Jiban to be grateful for those who approached him, warning that making friends wouldn't be easy. He insisted that because these people had managed to cross the Great Wall of his silence, they would become precious to his journey. Back in the present moment, the young man's expression hardened. He suddenly grabbed Gitai's wrist, causing the gangster to spin around and face him. Jiban stared back without flinching. Coldly, Gitai demanded to know which fool couldn't read the room. When Jiban attempted to grab him, Gitai caught the young man's wrist in return, questioning the audacity of such arrogance. Gripping the young man's hand, Gitai coldly remarked that his fingers were at least beautiful, but impassively warned that he might lose them if he tried to intervene again. He released his grip and asked if the message was clear, causing the young man to step back. Gitai then began to insult him, calling him an arrogant son of a bitch and asking if he was looking for trouble. A sudden car horn drew the gangster's attention to the street for a moment, but he quickly turned back to Byung-gu, who was lying on the ground. With a mocking laugh, Gitai asked Byung-gu what life was like without dreams before facing the group to sarcastically wish them a nice meal. As he strolled nonchalantly down the street, Byung-gu collapsed completely. His friend rushed over, shouting his name in panic. From the ground, Byung-gu asked if everyone else was all right, as the group gathered around to help him up. He assured them that he was fine and that the incident was in the past, suggesting they simply go back and eat out another time. Later on the rooftop, Kang Doyle was consumed by guilt, lamenting that he had frozen in fear and failed to do anything, meaning nothing had ultimately changed. When the girl asked who the man was, Jibon explained that it was Jung Gitai. He revealed that Gitai was the one who had cut off Byung-gu's finger while he was playing guitar, an act done specifically to ruin his friend's dream because Byung-gu had tried to stop the gangster's despicable behavior. The narrative then shifted to the past, showing a scene in a music room where Gitai was threatening a girl with a knife, ordering her to shut up or be killed. Byung-gu had grabbed him from behind, begging him to stop, but Gitai struggled free and ignored the pleas. When Gitai attacked with the weapon, Byung-gu raised his hands to block the blow. Spinning around, The attacker furiously demanded to know why Byung-gu was interfering and warned him not to act superior just because he was a musician. Staring him down, Byung-gu declared that Gitai didn't deserve to be in a place where dreams flourished because he was a person who destroyed them for selfish reasons. Confused and irritated by this lecture, Gitai dismissed the concept of dreams as nonsense, raising his knife before screaming at the students watching from the doorway to leave. He threatened to hack everyone to pieces, screaming for them to get out of his way as he shoved through the crowd and stormed down the hallway. While students rushed to help Byung-gu and shouted for a teacher, the aggressor disappeared. Back in the present, Jibon explained that the bully never returned to class after that day, leading everyone to believe the nightmare was over. However, he revealed that a far more terrible incident occurred 2 weeks later, when a bone-chilling scream erupted from the band room. Jibon recounted how Byung-gu had frozen in the hallway upon hearing the sound, so he was the one who opened the door and called out to his friend. Inside, Gitai was holding a pair of pliers, mocking Byung-gu's air of superiority. He ordered the trembling student to come closer and witness the harsh reality of having a dream, ranting about how meaningless life was without one. Jibon admitted that he froze in the doorway, paralyzed by the scene. Gitai, who was sitting on top of his victim, simply turned around and asked when Jibon had arrived. Standing up, he remarked that he felt refreshed, then stroked Jibon's face and whispered a warning. If he told anyone what he had seen, he would suffer the exact same fate. After Gitai left, Jibon remained rooted to the spot, unable to move. He explained to the others that Gitai eventually dropped out of school, went to a reformatory, and later joined a criminal organization as a loan shark. Jibon blamed Gitai for the person he had become, declaring that he had sworn an oath that anyone who destroyed another person's dreams should not be allowed to walk free. Falling to his knees, he cried out that he desperately wanted to be strong enough to make Gitai feel the same pain Byung-gu had endured, but he had frozen up once again. He confessed in a broken voice that he thought he had grown stronger, only to realize nothing had changed. The girl asked if this was the reason he was so intent on recruiting the transfer student. Jibon confirmed it, explaining that because their opponent was a real gangster, he needed to gather as much force as possible to subdue him and make the bastard pay for his actions. That, he declared, was why he needed help. Later, as they walked down the street, the girl expressed her understanding of the situation, but warned him that seeking revenge against a gangster could be incredibly dangerous. Doyle's story resonated deeply with Jibon, particularly the conviction that anyone who crushes another person's dreams should not be allowed to roam free. As he walked forward with a steady gaze, he concluded that his motivation wasn't personal revenge, but rather a necessary act of justice. Elsewhere, the topic of Yena's upcoming birthday arose during a conversation with a friend. The classmate asked if she had remembered the date and whether she planned to host a party. When the friend inquired if Jibon would be on the guest list, Yena hesitated, wondering aloud if his presence might be awkward. However, her friend quickly reassured her, insisting that he wouldn't ignore her on such a special day, before pointing toward the window to show that Jibon was currently outside. Looking into the courtyard, they saw him walking with Ariam. One of the girls recognized her as the silent student from the class next door. As two boys approached to greet the pair, Yena felt a sting of annoyance at how Ariam had become the center of attention. She turned away, bitterly asking herself why she should even care. Later that day, a group of boys complained that the school bread wasn't filling enough and asked Jibon to pick up lunch for them. Their conversation was interrupted when Ariam appeared at the door holding a bag and declared that she wanted to eat with them. Jibon glanced at her, and while one of the boys immediately agreed, he froze a moment later. Staring at her in shock, he asked if she had just spoken, surprised by the sudden change. The group soon turned their attention to her packed lunch, admiring the food. When Ariam offered to share, they readily accepted, while Yena watched the trio from a distance. In another part of the city, Gitai was on the phone confirming a deadline with a woman and instructing her to transfer money. However, as soon as she mentioned that her husband was returning, he abruptly ended the call. Continuing down the street, he spotted a business card stuck to a door, pulled it off, and entered the building. Inside, he announced his return to his boss, unaware that 3 young men were observing him closely. The teenagers commented on Gitai's strength and the fact that he had taken the card. One of them questioned the wisdom of recruiting a gangster, while another retorted by labeling such criminals as trash and the cancer of society. Hearing these insults, Kim Jin-woo turned around to face them. The boss of the establishment, visibly confused, asked who the boys were. When a henchman explained that they were discussing gangsters, the man was offended by the terminology and asked if the boys were referring to them. In a defensive tone, one of the young men insisted that they were merely small business owners who paid their taxes, prompting the boss to demand an explanation for why they were being judged as criminals. The young man froze, unable to find his voice, though he privately thought it was obvious that the men looked like criminals. Stepping closer, the boss demanded to know why he was so silent and asked if he had come there seeking a loan. The student recoiled in fear and hastily denied the accusation. Gitai then held up a business card, asking if the item belonged to him. The boy confirmed that it did, explaining that their only reason for visiting was to deliver that specific card. When Gitai inquired about the nature of Hound Dog, the boss interrupted, recognizing the name as part of a gambling operation run by a man named Duck. Another associate in the room clarified that it was a venue for betting on fights, a fact the student confirmed. The boss quickly deduced that the group recruited skilled individuals to generate profits for them. At that moment, Kim realized with dread that the people behind the fight club were actually gangsters. Elsewhere, Doyle approached Jiban to ask if he knew how to ride a motorcycle. When Jiban asked why, Doyle explained that he had twisted his ankle in gym class earlier and couldn't drive himself. He tossed a helmet to Jiban and requested a ride. Ariam immediately asked where they were headed, but Doyle simply replied that it wasn't far and he would provide directions along the way. Teasing her, he promised to bring her boyfriend back soon, prompting Ariam to quickly deny the relationship and insist they were just friends. Jiban remained silent, holding the helmet, and after telling Byung-gu they were going out for fresh air, the two boys left together. Outside, Doyle pointed to his bike and asked if Jiban could handle it. In response, Jiban popped a wheelie, leaving Doyle wondering if he could do the same. As they rode across the city, Doyle remarked on the trouble Jiban had already caused. Seeing a sharp curve ahead, he urgently warned Jiban to slow down, but the driver navigated the corner with absolute precision. Impressed and perplexed by the use of countersteering, Doyle questioned who Jiban really was. Upon reaching their destination, Doyle asked to be dropped off, and Jiban looked up at the building's sign. Crouching down, Doyle picked up a brick and held it to his ear like a phone. He sincerely admitted that if he had driven himself, he likely would have hesitated and turned back like last time, declaring that this object was his way of ensuring he wouldn't hold back again. Jiban immediately understood the gravity of the gesture, recognizing that the brick was essentially a formal declaration of war. Doyle justified his anger by revealing that the thug had humiliated Byung-gu so severely that the former band leader had wet himself in the middle of the street. He asked Jiban if such a disgrace was something he should simply let slide, insisting that he had to take at least this much revenge. With a tense expression, he stared at his friend, waiting for an answer. Meanwhile, back at the office, the boss dismissed the visitors, stating that the place wasn't meant for children. Kim explained that he had come looking for Jong Gitai after hearing rumors, identifying him as the senior who had dropped out of school to become a gangster. He clarified that they were organizing a main event fight and felt Gitai was the only right person for the job. Although Gitai skeptically asked if they were really trying to recruit him for a high school brawl, the young man insisted that the opponent was highly skilled and shouldn't be underestimated. The idea that there might be someone worthy of being his opponent piqued Gitai's interest. To prove his point, Kim handed over his phone to show footage of a troublesome transfer student named Jiban. As the video played, showing Jiban landing a solid hit during a previous fight and ending with a close-up of his face, Gitai's attention was completely captured. He immediately recognized the face on the screen as the boy he had seen earlier with Doyle, the one with the beautiful fingers. Returning to the present moment, Gitai's boss advised him not to interfere, dismissing the issue as a mere conflict between students. Gitai agreed with his senior, but their conversation was violently interrupted when a brick smashed through the window, whizzing past his face. A shard of flying glass sliced his cheek, causing him to turn around in a fury and scream, demanding to know who was responsible. The boss rushed to the window, shouting to ask if the culprits had a death wish, and together they spotted a motorcycle speeding away. Gitai stared through the broken glass, silently tracking the bike as it accelerated down the road, ignoring his boss's questions about whether he was all right. As they made their escape, Jiban reflected that while the provocation might have been reckless, he could physically feel the courage it had taken. Doyle's hand, gripping his shoulder tightly, was trembling. As they sped down the road, Jiban could feel a heavy, overwhelming sense of dread pressing down on them like an insurmountable mountain. It was a sensation of fear he recognized all too well. Meanwhile, negotiations for the fight were underway. Once Gitai confirmed he would participate in the Hound Dog event, the students thanked him profusely and promised to prepare with total dedication. However, the gangster immediately established his own terms, insisting that he would be the one to decide the time and location of the match, and demanding that they bring only their absolute strongest fighter. When one of the organizers suggested the school gym as the venue, Gitai scolded him for the foolish idea. He asked if the boy really thought a school environment was appropriate for someone of his status. Realizing how strict Gitai was, the student quickly backed down and agreed to the demands, accepting that the location would be changed. Shifting the topic, Gitai asked if they knew a guy named Kang Doyle. The student identified him as a freshman bully from Dyson Industrial High. Gitai paused to wonder if that punk had really grown up that much, while the student noted that Doyle was rumored to be expanding his influence. When asked about his sudden interest, Gitai simply ordered them to locate Doyle, declaring that the boy had a debt to settle. In a much quieter setting, Jiban was sweeping the temple courtyard when he stopped to greet his master. The master welcomed a visitor, asking if he had come to pray. It was Sangmin who explained that his mother had sent him because it was the first day of the month and they hadn't visited in a long time. The master praised this as an excellent initiative. However, Sangmin was shocked to find his classmate there and asked if Jiban actually lived at the temple. Sitting down, Sangmin admitted he had assumed Jiban stayed in the school dorms, mentioning that he used to visit this same temple during his own childhood. Excited by the discovery, Sangmin called a friend to reveal that Jiban was living at Siboam Temple. He urged the friend to come over and join them, adding a request to bring some good food along. A young man came running up the temple stairs, shouting Jiban's name. As Jiban turned to see who was calling, he realized it was Sangmin, who wasn't alone. Ariam was standing right behind him. Sangmin greeted his friend and explained that he had taken the liberty of messaging Ariam to invite her along as well. Turning to the girl, Sangmin asked if she was doing all right, to which she responded with a slight nod. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, a group of young men gathered around a broken scooter, trying to diagnose the problem. One guy suggested it might be a spark plug issue, while another, lounging comfortably in an armchair, wondered if the coil was actually to blame. When someone proposed taking the bike to a mechanic, the idea was quickly shot down by a companion who complained about the expense, causing the young man to look away in frustration. Suddenly, Gitai stepped in, adjusting a pair of brass knuckles on his hand. He coolly remarked that, given the number of opponents present, he was using the weapon simply to save time. Confused by the provocation, one of the group members demanded to know who he was and what he was talking about. Gitai bluntly stated that he was there to collect a debt. But when the man insisted he identify himself before starting a fight, Gitai responded with a sudden punch to the face. As the first man fell groaning to the ground, a second terrified member asked for a name, only to be silenced by another strike to the face. He collapsed instantly, leaving only the last member standing, who stared in shock at the devastating impact of the brass knuckles. Fixing his gaze on the sole survivor, Gitai decided the guy would make a perfect punching bag for practice. After Gitai insulted him and called him a piece of trash, the young man retaliated with threats, promising to finish the intruder off. The gangster simply smiled, noting that these fools still didn't understand who they were dealing with. Screaming for Gitai to shut up, the last man charged forward, yelling that he only needed one hit to end the fight. However, his punch hit nothing but air as Gitai dodged and immediately capitalized on the opening, landing 2 successive blows to his opponent's face. The man stumbled back, bloodied, but Gitai smiled and taunted him to try again. Realizing the difficulty of the situation but refusing to back down, the man accepted the challenge. He took a firm stance, declaring that he would prove just how far a guy who bragged about his size could actually go. Gitai stood over the man in the green tracksuit, who was already lying on the ground, and remarked that focusing solely on defense was useless if one was too slow. Taking the initiative, Doyle reacted by grabbing a metal pipe. He swung it down with all his might, screaming a death wish at his opponent, but Gitai effortlessly blocked the strike with crossed arms. Staring him down, the gangster asked Kang Doyle if he was truly ready. When the young man remained silent, Gitai shouted his name, questioning the audacity of the attack. Although Doyle tried to stand his ground, Gitai mocked him, declaring that he was still the same trembling coward as always. In response, Doyle told him to shut up and raised the weapon again. However, Gitai insisted that the boy would never defeat him, not even in death, and cruelly reminded him that he had done nothing but watch when Byung-gu's finger was amputated. Cursing the entire situation, Doyle tried to remain unfazed. The confrontation ended swiftly as Gitai ordered him to kneel, stating that the ground was his rightful place. When Doyle obeyed, the older man commanded him to look up, demanding to know how he dared to raise a pipe against a veteran. To punish this insolence, Gitai struck him across the head. He forced the young man to lift his face once more before punching him and calling him a worm. As Doyle collapsed, Gitai demanded that he beg for mercy. Completely broken, Kang Doyle bowed his head and surrendered. Meanwhile, the atmosphere was much more peaceful at a nearby temple, where worshippers were praying before a statue. Han Arum carefully served a meal to the group, prompting one of the men to comment that he hadn't seen her there before. She explained that it was their first visit, and the man kindly invited them to return more often. Later, while they were washing dishes, Sungmin mentioned to Jibun that Arum seemed to really enjoy the atmosphere of the place. While struggling with a heavy vase, one of the boys complained that he seemed to be the only one doing any hard work. Although a monk praised the group's collective effort, Sungmin insisted that he needed to work to justify earning his meal. In response, the monk encouraged them to rest before heading home, adding that he planned to invite them back more frequently in the future. By the time night fell, the group agreed that the day had flown by and the rest had been beneficial. Two of the boys asked Jibun if they could return to the temple occasionally to help out, with one admitting that the place brought him a sense of peace. Teasing his friend, Seungmin remarked that he looked like a monk in training, though he soon found himself wondering if he should consider that vocation himself. Suddenly, a shout alerting everyone to a fire shattered the calm. Jibun and his friend rushed outside to find the source of the commotion, where they saw a monk already extinguishing the flames. While bystanders speculated that a discarded cigarette butt caused the blaze and lamented such carelessness, the monk tried to comfort them by pointing out that they had luckily caught it in time. Despite the reassurance, Seungmin admitted he was terrified, and another boy commented that the scare had taken 10 years off his life, agreeing that the situation could have easily ended in a disaster. Amidst the confusion, Jibun noticed something odd. A business card for Hound Dog was stuck to the door. One of the guys pointed it out, noting that it definitely hadn't been there earlier. This discovery triggered a sudden vision of an injured Kang Doyle, who seemed to be pleading incessantly for Jibun to stay away from him. Meanwhile, inside a car parked on the street, a bespectacled man asked his subordinate if the match was fully organized. The young man outside confirmed that everything was prepared for the showdown between the gangster and the transfer student. From the back seat, the boss verified that the gangster's name was Jong Gitai. As the woman beside him asked for a lighter and mentioned that Gitai came from a decent industrial technical school, the man inquired about his specific gang affiliation. Upon learning that he was part of the Gyokdo Association, the man quietly repeated the group's name to himself as the vehicle drove away. The young man on the street interrupted the conversation to point out that the fighter was also under their management. He added that Gitai was eager to enter the match with high energy. This made the man wonder if the Gyokdo Association was intentionally sending players to boost the game's excitement. Realizing he couldn't refuse such an incredible opportunity, he admitted that they had to go through with it. Consequently, he ordered the young man to announce the match to everyone and promote it as aggressively as possible. When the subordinate foolishly asked whose side he was on, the boss called him an idiot, stating that he obviously supported the Gyokdo Association. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the forest, where Jibun was running along a path beneath the tree canopy. He moved through the vegetation at a steady pace until he reached a scenic viewpoint, where he paused to stretch and execute a high kick. Mentally preparing for the challenge ahead, he vowed to fight as hard as he could, no matter the circumstances. He reaffirmed his determination to become strong enough that no one would ever be able to threaten him again. His solitude was interrupted when his friends appeared, explaining that the monk had told them where to find him. While one friend commented that the climb was worth the effort for the view, another was more interested in getting some chocolate. Han Aryam, meanwhile, was simply trying to catch her breath after the exertion. Seungmin reminded Jibun that this was an important day, while another friend admitted he had come only because he was worried. The group promised to cheer for him with all their strength, regardless of who the opponent was, and Aryam confirmed she would do the same. Their unity gave Jibun strength, and he responded with resolve. Upon arriving at the venue, one of the group pointed ahead, noting the heavy atmosphere. Seungmin was astonished, realizing that the fight would actually take place in such a grim setting. Trembling without knowing why, another boy asked if Jibun was okay. Seeing that the friends showed no hesitation, one of the guys wondered if their support had truly reached Jibun. Several men were waiting in silence in front of a warehouse. The fight organizer stepped forward to greet Jibun, maintaining a cordial tone as he said it was an honor to see him arrive on time. However, the mood soured when one of Jibun's friends accused the man of setting the fire as a threat. The organizer feigned ignorance, asking what he was talking about, while his companion insisted they knew nothing. Dismissively, the man advised Jibun to ignore the details and focus on the fight, leaving the friend fuming with indignation. Describing the high stakes of the dispute, The organizer warned Gibbon not to underestimate his opponent and demanded that he fight with everything he had. Moments later, a shout signaled the opening of the gate, and as the doors swung wide, Gibbon and his friends stared into the warehouse. The atmosphere inside was heavy, filled with the noise of a crowd cheering incessantly. From the other side of the room, Yoongitai called out Gibbon's name, keeping his back turned as he announced he had been waiting. Slowly turning around, the gangster remarked that Gibbon should know exactly who he was because of Doyle. As Gibbon settled into a fighting stance, Aryam reacted with surprise, prompting Sungmin to ask if she knew the man. The group was shocked when one of the boys explained that Yoongitai was a real gangster. Giti confidently declared it was time to finish what they had started, but first, he introduced a special guest he claimed Gibbon would be happy to see. Gibbon and Aryam held their breath as the scene was revealed. Kang Doyle was chained in the center of the room. Humiliated, Doyle insisted that Gibbon shouldn't have come and begged him to leave, desperate not to be seen in such a state. Aryam covered her mouth in despair, calling out his name, while the confused friends demanded to know why Doyle was being treated this way. Coldly, Yoongitai asked if Gibbon understood why Doyle was in that situation. When the boy remained silent, the gangster asked if he truly wanted to protect the prisoner, promising revenge for everything he had suffered. He revealed that the key to the chains was in his pocket and promised to hand it over if he was defeated. However, he claimed he had no interest in money and set a brutal condition for his own victory. If he won, he would take 2 of Gibbon's fingers. Horrified by the proposal, the friends immediately protested, calling the terms unacceptable and labeling the opponent a psychopath. Han Aryam added a firm warning, confirming that the man was indeed cruel. A brief memory surfaced of the day Doyle's hands had trembled while holding onto a motorcycle, along with the realization that Byung-gu had been so terrified of Gitai that he had wet himself. Back in the present, the gangster asked if Gibbon was afraid. Although Gibbon recognized the man's power to instill terror in others, he decided he could no longer hold back. As his concerned friends asked if he was really going to go through with it, Gibbon simply took off his jacket. Seeing the young man's resolve, Jonggitai smiled with excitement. Gibbon took his position in the center of the arena, bracing himself for combat while the crowd went wild around him, and his friends watched with visible anxiety. As the 2 rivals stared each other down, surrounded by a sea of spectators, the announcer used a megaphone to declare that the fight would begin momentarily and urged everyone to place their bets. He introduced the first competitor, Jonggitai, as the powerhouse of the underworld, followed by Jibon, the transfer student who had famously defeated the champion. After asking the audience who they thought would win, he successfully ignited the atmosphere in the venue. Meanwhile, a countdown began, and inside the control room, a man with glasses monitored the feed. Noting that over 2,000 people were watching live, he remarked on the grandeur of the event and, declaring the stage set, urged the competitors to fight until blood was spilled. The match started with Jonggitai advancing without hesitation, launching an offensive with a knee aimed at Jibon's head. The boy blocked the strike and quickly countered with a kick before retreating to create space. While the crowd continued to cheer fervently, Gitai adjusted his stance for a new advance. Jibon defended himself against a flurry of punches, tracking each blow attentively. Although he possessed above-average speed and strength, he had never learned boxing or martial arts. Still, his impressive physique and street-fighting instincts made him a formidable opponent. Furious, Jonggitai shouted to ask if the boy was scared. Jibon responded by stepping in and delivering a clean, direct punch to the ribs. Feeling the impact, Gitai realized the blow was effective, but reacted immediately by punching Jibon in the face. He mocked the boy, claiming the hit only tickled and challenging him to continue. Jibon instinctively looked for openings, gauging the enemy's reaction speed. Even without technical skills, the opponent used his natural physical abilities to overcome difficulties, managing to hit Jibon repeatedly. When the boy responded firmly with another kick to the face, Gitai scoffed, asking if it was a massage, and questioning if Jibon really believed he could win that way. Shouting that he would show him reality, Gitai launched another attack. As Jibon absorbed the blow, he felt his rage intensifying rather than fading, even as the crowd roared Jonggitai's name. On the sidelines, Jibon's friends debated who had the upper hand. One observed that Jibon's guard was starting to fail, while another analyzed the physical disparity, stating that the opponent's superior build meant a severe hit could be catastrophic. They concluded that Jibon's strategy was to knock his opponent out by gradually accumulating damage. Gitai's strategy relied entirely on overwhelming force, with the specific intention of ending the match in a single, decisive blow. Watching the contest with dread, Aryam noted that if Jibon took a direct hit, everything would be lost. Her attention was diverted when Kang Doyle called out to her from the spot where he was chained. She rushed away from the edge of the arena to reach him, where Doyle urgently demanded to know why she had brought Jiban into this mess. Aryum explained that he had no choice because the gang had threatened to burn down the temple where he lived. Cursing the situation, Doyle insisted that she free him, but she reminded him that Jung Gitai held the key. Doyle vowed to find a way to get it, warning her that Gitai was as unpredictable as a snake. Struggling to keep her composure, Aryum agreed with him. Meanwhile, the exchange of blows in the center continued with intensity. Han Aryum turned her gaze back to the action, following every movement closely. Jiban's friends shouted encouragement, cheering as he managed to land solid strikes against his opponent. They urged him to show his skills and hit harder, pushing him to press the attack. However, as Jiban closed the distance, the fighter revealed that he had been waiting for that exact moment. Roaring that self-defense techniques were useless on the streets, Gitai launched a trap he had set on purpose. Jiban realized his mistake too late as a massive punch struck his face, snapping his head back violently. His friends screamed his name, unable to believe what was happening. Gitai proclaimed that this was the wall of reality, boasting that a hothouse plant could never defeat someone who had truly fought on the asphalt. Asserting that nothing mattered in the face of raw power, he ordered the boy to know his place and bade him goodbye as Jiban's vision began to fail. In that darkness, however, a memory flashed through Jiban's mind, a girl holding his face, begging him to cheer up and see it through, followed by a confession of love. His heart began to beat faster, and propelled by this sudden surge of new energy, Jiban rose to his feet. Although Han Aryum shouted for him to wake up, he remained silent, focusing entirely on his opponent. When Gitai threw another punch, Jiban shocked him by blocking the blow with both arms, causing the astonished aggressor to curse him for his resilience. Despite his injuries, Jiban stood his ground and launched a counterattack, striking his rival across the face hard enough to force him back a few steps. Watching the intensity escalate, Jiban's friends remarked that this was no longer a game. Both fighters were deadly serious. Gitai admitted that he hadn't felt such a rush in a long time, claiming his dopamine was surging. Although he acknowledged that Jiban was better than expected, he still dismissed the boy as a mere snack for a predator. With that insult, he moved in on the offensive. After Jiban landed a solid kick and squared up to his opponent, Gitai explained the brutal reality of his world. Gangsters couldn't afford to lose because defeat meant death. Roaring that he would never let the boy win, he struck Jiban in the face. One of Jiban's friends shouted that the man was like a zombie as the violence intensified. As the exchange of blows continued, the group noticed a shift in Jiban's strategy. Instead of blocking, he was now actively dodging the attacks. When Jiban slipped past another punch, the frustrated aggressor cursed at him. Suddenly, a friend pointed out that Jiban had dropped his guard completely, standing motionless to the surprise of the crowd. Taking the bait, Gitai called him a loser and charged, only for Jiban to land a precise punch directly to his chin. Kang Doyle realized that Jiban had deciphered his opponent's pattern. He concluded that Gitai's obsession with landing a single knockout blow made his movements predictable. Having anticipated the attack and identified this weakness, Jiban dodged again and delivered a powerful kick to the aggressor. The dynamic shifted when Gitai grabbed a piece of wood, cursing as he pointed the weapon at Jiban. The young man simply stared back, unfazed. Roaring that the real fight was just starting, Gitai declared that the rules no longer applied, instantly darkening the mood in the arena. Jiban's friends immediately accused the gangster of cheating, calling him a coward, while the announcer warned that using a weapon was a violation. However, Gitai told the losers to be quiet, asking if they thought this was just a game. He challenged anyone in the audience to step in before turning back to Jiban and daring him to finish the contest. After Jiban agreed that this was a confrontation between the two of them rather than a game, Gitai bellowed that it was a real fight. He advanced, promising to crush the boy. Swinging the improvised torch, the aggressor yelled at Jiban not to mess with gangsters, while the friends watched in horror at the unfair advantage. However, the young man managed to block the attack with a well-timed kick, before immediately following up with a strike to his opponent's head. Defeated, young Gitai collapsed to the ground. The spectators began to murmur among themselves, calling him pathetic for a gangster, and noting that he seemed finished. Amidst the chaos, the key to Kang Doyle's chain slipped from Gitai's pocket and landed on the floor, catching Hanaram's attention. Refusing to accept defeat, Gitai forced himself up, roaring that it wasn't over, and that he wouldn't stop until one of them was annihilated. Jiban responded by rushing toward his rival and landing a direct blow, followed by another hit that sent the gangster crashing back down. From his knees, Gitai protested that he couldn't lose to a failure like Jibon. The young man replied that Gitai had no right to feel wronged, pointing out that he was nothing more than an oppressor of the weak. Jibon condemned his rival, telling him that destroying others' dreams might have made him feel superior, but it didn't make him strong, and he deserved to live in mediocrity for the rest of his life. Suddenly, Jong Gitai pulled out a knife and lunged, attempting to stab Jibon in the back. The crowd watched in disbelief as one of Jibon's friends roared a warning for him to look behind him. Taunting that he never should have turned his back on a gangster, Gitai knocked Jibon to the ground and positioned himself for the kill. He promised to annihilate the boy, threatening that Jibon would forever regret crossing him whenever he looked in the mirror. Declaring himself the ultimate winner, Gitai savored the moment, raising the knife to strike. Before the blade could fall, a blaze of fire hit Gitai's face. Kang Doyle had intervened, striking the gangster with a flaming piece of wood. Pinning him to the ground, Doyle turned to check if Jibon was okay, to which the boy simply nodded. Iram wondered how Doyle had gotten free, but her friend realized she must have been the one to release him. Doyle then looked at Jibon, asking if he could finish it, before sitting on top of Gitai and beginning to break his fingers. Jibon tried to intervene, telling him to wait, while Gitai pleaded from the ground for him not to continue. When Doyle asked why, Gitai begged the brat to stop. The young man reminded him that he had done the exact same thing to others, but Gitai claimed he was different because he belonged to a different class. Ignoring the excuse, Doyle calmly warned that there was just one left and broke another finger. As he prepared to snap the final one, Jong Gitai begged him to wait, shouting insults and calling him a bastard. Desperate, he asserted his status as a gangster and threatened that his superior would kill Doyle if he ever found out. Kang Doyle reacted with indifference, asking why Gitai would run to his superior and dismissing such a threat as childish behavior. Just then, the match organizer and his team rushed in, shouting for them to stop, but Jibon intercepted the man, using his arm to block the path while Doyle remained positioned over the defeated gangster. The organizer demanded to know if Jibon realized what he was doing and if he was prepared to bear the consequences. Jibon glanced back at Doyle, who simply smiled in response. From the ground, Jong Gitai begged for mercy, pleading that he was a veteran, but Doyle viewed him with utter disdain. He remarked that Gitai looked even more like trash now and admitted he felt ashamed for having ever been afraid of him. With that, he snapped the man's last finger, causing a girl in the crowd to cover her mouth in horror as the spectators watched in shock. The organizer tried to declare the match invalid, arguing that the situation had descended into chaos, but the audience immediately pushed back. Spectators pointed out that the gangster had broken the rules first, and even a gambler who had bet on Gitai conceded that Jibon was the rightful winner. Soon, chants for Jibon's victory filled the room. While the organizer glared at the impassive boy, Jibon's friends shouted that everyone had witnessed the opponent's defeat. As the crowd continued to chant his name, Jibon stood beside Doyle, casting a glance over his shoulder. Meanwhile, back in his office, the man with glasses was perplexed by how events had unfolded, admitting they had far exceeded his expectations. He realized that Jibon had defeated a member of the Jokdo Association during peak viewership, a humiliation that would turn the gang into a laughingstock. Cursing the outcome, he worried about the imminent financial loss and placed the blame entirely on Jibon, wondering how he would handle the fallout. Outside the venue, a black car pulled up. The driver announced their arrival, but his superior instructed him to wait. Moments later, the driver spotted Jong Gitai stumbling out of the warehouse and reported that he had left the premises. In response, the superior simply ordered the engine turned off. Gitai approached the vehicle, desperately calling out to his boss. He pleaded for help, claiming that the bastards who assaulted him were still inside and urging the superior to act immediately to catch them. Instead of offering help, his superior responded by punching him in the head and kicking him away. As Jong Gitai collapsed to the ground, crying out for his boss, the man asked if he hadn't already warned him to stay away from fights involving students. Gitai tried to justify his actions, but he could only manage incoherent gurgles. The superior ignored his pleas and kicked him again while he was down. Jibon and his group watched the scene from a distance as Gitai continued to stammer apologies. Kang Doyle remarked that although Gitai acted like a gangster, he was actually a nobody. After expressing his gratitude to Jibon and the rest of the friends, Doyle's conversation was interrupted by Han Areum, who stated that they all needed priority medical treatment. She insisted that they go to the hospital immediately, but Doyle dismissed the concern, claiming he only needed a few days of rest. He then walked away with Jibon, looking to him for confirmation. In a flashback, Jibon found himself wondering when he would finally be able to forget the person who held the power to make his heart either stop or race. The scene shifted to a group of students walking down the street, and then to a classroom where a teacher scolded a student for dozing off. Later, two girls confronted Han Aryam, calling her ridiculous and questioning her about giving Jibon a phone. Yena bluntly asked if she intended to date him. When Aryam hesitated to answer, Yena reminded her that she was already aware of her feelings for the boy. However, Aryam clarified that it was more than just dating. She explained that she felt a deep curiosity and yearned to know everything about him. The other girl accused her of deception and trying to seduce Jibon, reminding her of the connection between Yena and the boy. When Han Aryam reiterated that they were just talking, Yena slapped her across the face. She demanded that Aryam stop playing games and declared that she would not give Jibon up. As the two girls walked away, leaving her alone, Han Aryam touched her cheek and whispered that Yena was the deceptive one, wondering if she couldn't have shown at least a little regret.